Dun, 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 dun,
Na,
dun,
na, na,
dun,
na.
dun, 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 boom, boom. Okay.
Dum.
Hey, everybody. Hopefully you can see us and hear us. Uh, I'm Jason.
Happy Friday.
That's Lynn. And that's Allison.
I'm
Yeah. So, anybody see that speech by Biden? That was the Star Wars. Da, 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 da. Um, yeah, so we're going to talk today about the American experiment, deconstructing Biden's Philadelphia Soul speech, and I think this will be a great conversation. Allison, do you have control of the slides? Did you get the thing? Are you in?
I
Do you
think I do.
do
Do you
you
want
have
me
the
to see
do
if
you
I
have
can
the?
advance the
Yeah,
slide? Let me see. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, do we want to start off with some just introductory thoughts before I plow through my the long march through my slide deck? I'm curious what you guys are thinking. I mean, I mostly part of the reason I wanted to do this was I feel like as a Philadelphian who knows about encoded landscapes and things that I really wanted to make some connections and really sort of parse through the language that was imprinted in there. And I'm taking lessons from Steffers and sort of decoding like the semiotics and some of the visuals in the language. And again, as a Philadelphian, I thought it was sort of my responsibility to lay this out here. But yeah, I wanted to sort of engage both of you guys in conversation, and since even though we're all technically recognizing that the ideological spectrum is manufactured, theoretically we represent sort of different positions on that spectrum in terms of our geographies, like more conservative, more progressive. So I thought it might be nice to have a conversation about it.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing, obviously, the most glaring thing was just the imagery. It was, I didn't even like when I first saw it. I didn't even, excuse me, I didn't know. I'm still dealing with my cough a little bit, guys, so bear with me. I didn't even realize that there was some blue back there. I just saw the red, but I was like, wow, this looks like it's something straight out of like Star Wars or something, and Darth Vader should be giving a speech up there or something. So that was my first initial thought. Lynn.
Very
I
memeable.
accidentally,
Lynn accidentally sent me the
I
mocked up version, and I was like, Lynn, I think that was photoshopped.
no,
It
she goes,
replaces
is that
the
a
feel.
hammer and sickle that I see there? And so I had two screenshots. One was the actual one was some funny meme that was going around. And I sent Allison the wrong one, and she's going, that looks like a hammer and sickle. But it was an oops,
That
wrong
was
one.
photoshopped, Lynn.
Yeah. No, don't fall for
Yeah.
everything you see on the internet. Some of it's Photoshop. But yeah,
Yeah.
I instantly thought, okay, what's up with these theatrics and what's going on here? Because the thing is, it was meant to be shocking. I think it was meant to be polarizing and incite all kinds of emotions.
Exactly. And so I went through the polarization is really central, and it gave me an excuse to go back through Oliver Reiser's World Sensorium book from 1946. So really at the beginning of the UN, and Julian Huxley and this guy think this idea that we're going to create this emergent superorganism out of information and the new world order and all of that sort of thing. Now, if you don't remember me talking about Oliver Reiser before, he was a professor of philosophy at Pitt, University of Pittsburgh, for I don't know, like 40 years. He was very connected with a variety of high-level scientists, including Einstein, around field theory and metaphysics and parapsychology, and was also working with Julius Stolman and Irvin Laszlo on sort of this emergent man concept up through the 60s, I think. So he was very well connected, and this World Sensorium book really is kind of a handbook of what they imagine they're doing, right? And again, these aren't cranks; these are people who are very well connected. The Foundation for Integrated Education that Fritz Kunst and Julius Stolman advanced, like the chair of that program was I think it was Harry Margenau at Yale. He was the chair of physics, and his specialty. Yeah, sorry.
I'm just going to interrupt you. I'm going to go grab a thing for my throat real quick. It might help. So
Okay.
I'll be right back. Pardon me.
I have the control now. I have the next slide up. So yeah, so it gave me a chance to revisit the World Sensorium book and apply that to what I was seeing in the space. And then the other thing that, again, Steffers put on my radar is this idea of the merge that's coming with Ethereum. And Ethereum is sort of this smart contract layer of the metaverse. And, you know, even if you don't have a really good handle on all of the blockchain stuff, essentially what was the way it was operating initially was through something called proof of work. And proof of work meant that there were tokens issued for computers to perform high-level cryptographic puzzle solving, which was really energy intensive. And then depending on which machine solved the puzzles, they would get the tokens and the Bitcoin and that sort of thing. And so that was proof of work, but clearly it took a certain amount of time. It was not as fast as the transactions need to be, and it was very energy intensive. So there was no way that we're going to run immersive reality and all the little micro transactions on proof of work. And so they're pivoting now into something called proof of stake, which I'm a little less clear on, Jason. And I don't know if you have any thoughts, if you can articulate proof of stake versus proof of work for me.
There he is.
Sorry.
It's okay.
There's different ways to stake. You can stake either by showing that you're participating, you're a stakeholder. So if you're in a DAO, like being a member of the DAO would give you a stake. But there's also things where you can actually buy stake. So there's different ways to do it, but it's moving away from just having the computers, solve a problem. It's based on you're like an American. You're a citizen. You're kind of a digital citizen of this network sort of thing. I don't know if that makes sense, but
okay, so it's a different way of securing the transactions, I guess, that is less energy intensive and will allow them to bring this open metaverse immersive reality to scale. And so part of what this is in the background, right? Like we know these things are coming, even if everything seems to be going back to normal. We know that they want to roll out the smart contract layers with this self-sovereign digital identity. And a lot of that will be coming in coordination with electronic government. And what does democracy mean, right? What does democracy mean in a blockchain world? And for the most part, I don't think most people, unless you're operating in the blockchain space, and even if you're operating in the blockchain space, you may be really just dealing in crypto and investing, but not understanding all the other uses of tokens. It's really going to change what they imagine democracy to be. And so the focus of this entire speech was really on the threat to democracy, right? And that the MAGA Republicans, over and over and over and over again, the MAGA Republicans were the threat, and it was establishing the polarity in the dynamic. And that is what Oliver Reiser says is required of the social physics is social unrest to advance the program forward. And I believe what they're actually advancing is the open metaverse, is a new version of democracy that will essentially use the polarization to create the synthesis, right? The Hegelian dialectic, right? To bring them together, maybe left and right, and say, oh, yes, like blockchain is our answer. You're right. We will have our new democracy and it will be participatory. Maybe it will be distributed. Maybe the libertarians will like that. Maybe the progressives will love that, that they can have some social justice tokens. Like everyone will end up being happy once we have our democracy on blockchain, but they're not actually saying that right now. So this is the lead in to the story. And so that's the centering of the threat. And if you understand it as a spectacle, as a, well, let me see what the next slide says. Okay, so this is from the World Sensorium, and I will just read. When I was just shocked to revisit this because I read it about 2 months ago and I forgot a lot of it. It says that to accomplish this new organism, like essentially this new phase of evolution that's based on information, that you create these energy bursts to catalyze these new scenarios. And they literally say, we must learn how to muster an authority capable of casting a spell over humanity and create a new design for planetary living. Now, if I was going to like find, a powerful magus or something, like, I don't think it would be Joe Biden, honestly. Like, that's not like that's more maybe of an Obama role, really. Like, but like, for the time being, this thing is rolling out and Biden is the man up front. So he's got to be the spellcaster, at least say the words. Like, he's the one who's like tasked with the incantation. And, so while some of the stuff that I bring in, I'm bringing in as a Philadelphian who knows the layers of history on this space. Like, they chose to have it at Independence Mall, not just for the obvious reasons of freedom, but all of the other overlays that are around that if you didn't live here and you didn't care about history, you wouldn't know about. So I'm going to be bringing things in. Now, can I prove that this is all part of them setting an intention to manifest a future that is this blockchain superorganism? No, I can't. But I'm being creative. And I figure at this point, I want to lay it out because honestly, unfortunately, I have a pretty good record. And I think like laying it out now, and then we'll see in a couple years how things pan out and how close I was or how far off I was. So bear with me. This is a creative process of deconstructing their possible spell casting. So this is something that actually came into my email in the spring. It's dated March of 2022. And the American Philosophical Society is right next to Independence Hall, where the speech was given. And I've been there. I've done research there. I'm not sure if it's a reproduction building or if it's the original, but it was established by Ben Franklin. And essentially, all of the sanctioned scientists, like even up to present day, that's their thing. It's the history of science, scientific technology, and interestingly, also indigenous language, because that's a whole other technology in and of itself that they want to control. And now you can't even go in there unless you have all your documentation of all of your health status things. You can't even get into the science place. But this email that came in to my box was talking about the revolutionary city. And one of the things we're going to touch on consistently is the idea of circuits and circuitry and cybernetics and circles. So a revolution is a spiral, is a polarity, is a movement, is a revolution. So that is an imprinted, and they were getting grants for researchers to develop a portal. Now, portals are always interesting words. There's many, many people that talk about data portals, but a portal is sort of like a way into another set of information, that they were going to create a portal to the nation's founding. So if you imagine immersive reality, right, and you're curating reality out of information, they're going back in the archives and pulling out stories, uncovering hidden stories is what they say, of the revolutionary past. And it's coming with money from the National Endowment for the Humanities. And the grant is literally called SHARP. Now, later we'll talk a little bit about this knife visualization, but the fact that the grant itself is called the, and it's such a stretch, the Sustaining the Humanities Through the American Rescue Plan. Let me just say that again. So this is the National Endowment for the Humanities, for them to go back in the portal, the revolutionary portal, and save our history through the SHARP grant. And SHARP stands for Sustaining the Humanities Through the American Rescue Plan. And they're getting like 11 early career contingent scholars, which means they're hardly paying anything to these poor graduate students to build the revolutionary portal, right? But they're going to curate the stories, right? And so that's part of the revolution. And I would say understanding semiotics and structuring the story and the narrative arc, that's part of it, is to part of the spell is that you tell the story, and this structure that's doing the SHARP story saving in the portal. The historical portal is right next to where the speech was given. So, I mentioned before about the metaverse. Like, the metaverse is coming. Like, it's not Meta. It's not Mark Zuckerberg. Like, immersive reality, really not necessarily virtual reality, but augmented reality is coming. and actually I'll have a slide later, but one of the key presences in this is actually a company called Cesium, which is about 5 blocks away from where this speech was given on 11th Street. And so this slide says it's about the open metaverse. And I was having a bit of a back and forth with people in the comment section the other day on the mental health one. They were talking about open being good. Like, oh, it's open, it's good. Like, it means everyone can participate. And I'm like, yeah, no, open, because they need us all to build the digital prison. Just because it's open doesn't mean it's not a prison. It simply means that the standards are all going to be aligned so that everyone can help build the prison. Because if we had to wait and only certain people built the prison, we would never be in prison. And they need us to be in the prison. So we're all going to participate. And that's part of the open piece. And so that connection, the connections and the emergence of the smart contract layer of augmented reality is central to blockchains. And so I'll just read this quote from the website, this open metaverse website. The metaverse is upon us. It should be open. An already booming gaming and online ecosystem, and gaming is key, and gaming is pretty much betting and gambling too, has been thrust years further into the future than anyone expected, although I'm sure some people expected it. The convergence of a number of new technologies, including mixed reality, blockchains, cryptography, and self-sovereign identity, and that's your digital ID, whether that's your health care ID or your digital driver's license or your electronic transcript from Greenlight Credential, makes this possible, what science fiction authors and gamers have dreamed up for decades. And so this is the context. Like, we can't listen to Biden without knowing that this is in the background. Now, does he actually say any of this in the speech? Does he say, I'm prepping y'all for a democratic open metaverse because we're all going to go through the portal, the revolutionary portal, where I'm going to cut it with my subtle sharp knife and we're going to push us into the other side through the Ethereum merge? No, he doesn't say that. And honestly, I'm not really even convinced that he's capable of knowing that, but that's what's in the background. So do you guys want to chime in before I keep going? I don't want to keep, thoughts.
Well, I was just going to point out Charles Hoskinson, the video clip that you've played multiple times. I'll put it in the comment section. But that clip of him talking about Ethiopia and putting all the kids on blockchain, and it will equalize them with the world and with the US, and it gives everybody agency and a voice. It's and it's an, this open, I think he used the word open. Just wanted to point that out because they were going to scale it nationwide in Ethiopia. I mean, with
and I think
the government.
We had a bit of a conversation before just about the fact that the Democrats were really picking up throughout the speech sort of a really patriotic, like, nationalist framing, which isn't usually the thing they hype. Like, that tends to be more in the conservative sector. And it was a little bit out of character. And it's interesting.
I see that locally as well.
Yeah, because ultimately the metaverse is going to be the new world order, right? The metaverse is going to be everybody equal on the blockchain, everybody their own node, transacting, with the new, whatever, global constitution of international arbitration, whatever, on the blockchain. So clearly the people in the Biden administration know that that's the plan. So it's interesting to see them co-opting what tends to be a conservative angle to get their message across.
Well, I didn't have time to do this, and I'll do it later. But you had brought up the 1,000 points of light, and of course that was George Herbert Walker Bush's. They created a foundation actually, and they were really pushing volunteerism through that. But I was like, I'm going to go back and listen to that speech, and I was thinking it was the inaugural, but it wasn't the inaugural speech. It was actually his acceptance speech for the nomination in 1998, and there were a few lines in there that were like verbatim what Biden just said. So I'm going to put a thing together afterward, and I'll put those side by side. But I thought that was interesting. There was actually a few phrases that were repeated. I'm sure you can find a lot of this if you were to go back and listen to different speeches.
Yeah. Well, and so I pulled this little clip. The sound quality isn't the best, but I've often mentioned Stephen Newcomb's framing about the states of exception, and in talking about cultural changes, like sea changes, in existence on these lands that were, now the United States, North America, the Americas, where something changed, and then all of a sudden the old way of being was not tolerated anymore, and then the new way of being came online. And I feel like that's where we're at in this moment of the metaverse, is we're on the threshold of being pushed into this new way of being. And so his book, Pagans in the Promised Land, is really informative in that way. And I was on a radio show today, which is more conservative, but in Chattanooga. And I kind of closed out saying, I think, the Indian reservations are the model for the smart cities that are coming, for the Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, tracking systems, and these states of exception. So we need to sort of reflect on the history and then learn those lessons and apply them to our current circumstance. So this is just a short clip where essentially Stephen is describing what it would be like when you simply do not have enough information to make to be an informed participant in the conversation. Like that the worldview is so different that it's hard to bridge the gap and come to a common understanding where you can actually communicate. And he's talking about when the first ships came over to the New World, and the indigenous people stood on the shore and they were like, well, what's that, right? And so I would say for the vast majority of people who are not in this really tiny blockchain crypto space, they don't even have a conceptualization of what might be coming in terms of a Bitcoin superorganism, smart contract layer. They don't have it.
They have no under those initial ships, the first ships coming toward the shore. Obviously, they have no understanding of the language that's being spoken by those foreigners, those invaders on those ships. When those invaders come to shore, they don't know what language they're speaking. They have no sense of what their ideas are, their mentality is, or anything. And in short order, they will begin to find out through the behavior of those people. But how long will it take them or their descendants to understand the language of the invader to an extent necessary to have this kind of a conversation that we're having today? I think about that a lot, because our ancestors had no understanding of those documents that created the impetus and the goal that they had in sailing those ships.
Yeah. I mean, that is such an important clip, because what Stephen has really spent most of his adult life studying are the original documents in Latin of these papal bulls that essentially provided the legal apparatus for the attempted erasure of the people who were already here when the new people came and sought to secure the land and resources. And I really feel like today the smart contract layer is the new papal bull, right? And it's not even, instead of it just being a pope out there somewhere, it's a machine ultimately. This stuff is being hooked into a machine. And the machine is a governing machine. It's a cybernetic machine. And we've talked about this in detail in some other talks, but I'm trying to frame out some of the headspace of these people so we can start to get on the same page, because I don't know, what's that meme? Like, I do not think that word means what you think it means. Like the democracy, right? Like, I think you're using democracy thinking, like telling us, so we're imagining it the old way we might. And again, for the original people, the democracy did not work out so great for them, right? Like there's always been people that the democracy was not working out for. But yeah, it's going to be way different. And it's going to be a cybernetic structure of governance, which Jason and we did a whole talk around Elon Musk and cybernetics and stigmergy and spintronics and creating this organism. And so when I was doing some research actually on the stuff we're going to talk about next week with Leo on the radio ecology, and looking at this forest that the U.S. military industrial complex irradiated, the sacred forest mountaintop in Puerto Rico, I stumbled into this statue, which was, it's about 2.5 hours east of El Yunque, the forest in Arecibo, which is where I think DARPA built a giant radio telescope in the 60s. So there's already some weird stuff going on in this town on the western side of Puerto Rico. But this sculpture was created by Soviet from Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, Zurab Tsereteli, who was a very important Russian sculptor, and it was part of two pieces. One was in Seville, Spain, and then this one is called Birth of the New World. The one in Spain was called Birth of the New Man. So you have the new man in the new world, and he made it in the 90s to celebrate the 500th anniversary of Christopher Columbus. And then he shopped it around in the United States, and nobody wanted it because it is like the tallest sculpture in the Western Hemisphere. It's 100 feet taller than the Statue of Liberty. It's this giant sculpture. And it's kind of a weird, like if you look at the thing, the head is too small, the arms are really big, and it's got a steering wheel in front. And one of the critiques was, hey, they didn't even have those back then. Like those didn't come till after Columbus. They didn't have the steering wheel. And I'm like, guys, the steering wheel is the symbol of the cybernetics. And Google has the Kubernetes, the pilot, the governance structure. So as your boat is going off across the ocean and it's being blown by the wind and the currents, the steering mechanism to keep you on the pathway of optimization is the cybernetic system. And so to me, this is an incredibly significant symbolic imprint. You know, they wanted to put it in New York on Roosevelt Island, and it got turned down. Then Donald Trump said he wanted it. So that's interesting. Donald Trump said he was interested. And I think, I can't remember. Anyway, that didn't work out. Then they tried Columbus, Ohio, which is, of course, where Standard Oil and Rockefeller were. Then they tried Miami and Fort Lauderdale, a couple places in Florida, and eventually, and it has a whole saga. Like it rusted, it was in the sand, it had to be shipped. And then finally, they got it put up in 2017. So the cybernetic governance piece is really important to the speech. And let me see. And maybe Jason, you can hold up your book. So Norbert Wiener, for me, I mean, he's one of the key people. He worked closely with a Mexican cardiologist called Arturo Rosenblueth. And the book he came up with in the post-World War II era, and they were all very active in the Macy conferences, was cybernetics, or control and communication in the animal and the machine. So when we submit ourselves to electronic, digital, blockchain government, literally, we are being programmed by the governor. and the governor goes back to 19th century, or maybe even 18th century, this Watt governor, which was controlling the oxygen that went into an engine and a piston to keep it going steady, a steady state, that it wouldn't go too fast or too slow, to keep it governed. And then that is what they want to apply to society.
Yeah, I just picked up this book. Maybe I'll get it bigger, but it's by Norbert Wiener, which you know who he is. He was kind of one of the grandfathers. I don't know how you word that.
God Wiener.
The God Wiener. It's God and Golem Inc. And then it's a comment on certain points where cybernetics impinges on religion. I haven't actually read it yet, but I just picked this up. But yeah, I'll give you guys a report back after I read it. It's a short book, actually.
I remember, Alison, when we were at the Mormon Transhumanism Association meeting, and they had the book about God, and they had multiple books on God and blockchain. They're always trying to mix God with their agenda.
Well, and it's interesting. In the speech, there's quite a bit about sacred. He uses the word sacred several times in the speech. And so to me, I keep positioning this as sacred versus profane, and the sense of the fact that, like, are we thinking that we're technicians, that these individuals imagine that they're going to control everything from the tiniest microbe all the way up to, clouds and lightning and directed energy and all of these things. So it's the technician in the materialism versus the sacred and the unknown. And so this feels very much like even Wiener himself, who was the main cyberneticist, was grappling with this problem. And this is back I mean, I don't know how old that book is, but probably the 50s, if at the latest. And so we're 75 years out, and we're still not really, like, you don't see much discussion of this in the public sphere, even among the churches. I don't really think, like, the questioning of the technician's approach to society. So one of the things Stephen Newcomb talks about in Pagans in the Promised Land, you know, he mentions like the Liberty Bell being the dome, and the dome of domination, that the indigenous people, you know, of the Americas, when folks came, they were like, okay, so these are our new rules, you know, and this is our dome, and you can come and live under the dome if you agree to live under our culture and our rules and forget the other stuff you were doing. But if you don't agree to that, we will try to use the force of the, you know, all the force, military force we have at our disposal, or economic force, to wipe you out.
Yeah, assimilation,
right? So
or
not.
Yeah, assimilation or extermination. Thank you.
Yeah. And so the Liberty Bell, in some ways, even though it's like, we often joke like the freedom, the dome, the freedom ring, right? That the Liberty Bell is an example of that. Although it has a crack in it, so like there's some options there. maybe we can figure stuff out. But it's interesting to me in the public art sphere, because Roz Ben is always talking about how the public art imprints intention into the land of Philadelphia, specifically the art museum, because he talks about like whatever happens, like that's a sacred mound, is like with full agreement of the earth. And so the image next to the Liberty Bell is a public art fund project in the metaverse. And so they actually created, it's really unattractive, as far as I can tell, an augmented reality app where you hold it up, and a dome, a Liberty Bell made out of, it looks like strings, red and blue strings, messy strings, makes this soundscape. It rings back and forth on your phone, like bong, bong, but it's not really there. It's only in the metaverse. So to me, like, that's extending the dome of domination through the portal into the beyond, like into the smart contract layer of the beyond. Like, we don't even get away from the dome of domination in the material, because guess what? They've recreated it there, and they've created a whole soundscape, because we know part of the communication and control system is acoustics. So we've got this messy Liberty Bell thing, and in the image, they're actually focusing it on the art museum, which is a really central place for spectacle and imprinting intention. So, you know, again, the Independence Hall and the location of the speech is important. So here I have an image. On the left is the swearing in of Biden, and in the background it has the Capitol. And some of the research I've been doing for the last couple months is looking at complexity theory, looking at these looking at the AI and how these systems, how these theories are actually put in place. And they have been really, the gaming and the simulation stuff was all throughout the Cold War. Like post World War II, even through World War II, the cybernetics was happening around the weapon systems. But then the gaming got applied to the social systems as well throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s on up to today. And now it's super sophisticated. And so there's an aspect of complexity theory where they talk about trying to catalyze emergent behavior around the edge where order meets chaos, and to create cybernetic circuits, circles, holons, where you can maximize an edge, and then you have these random molecules, and that they get energy from the circle itself that's stable, that's holding the energy, and they can catalyze new patterns, life, ideas, and that we're breaking society down into all these little circles in their misguided quest to create some sort of new thing. And so I think that the compelling image of the Capitol as not only the dome, but the circuit of order, governance, and then you've got the quote unquote insurrection, which is to me embodied by the guy in the buffalo hat, right? It's like ridiculous. But I think that's supposed to represent, I mean, it's so silly because clearly it's not an indigenous person, but like insurgency, right? Like the wars that the U.S. military fought against the original people on those lands, they were asymmetrical warfare. And it was very chaotic, that the kind of warfare that was carried on, like the Apache Wars. And so I think that is the chaos in an over-the-top ridiculous way that's represented by that. And this guy in the buffalo hat has a Q sent me. And I think the Q is actually also very important because I think it exemplifies the switch, the on-off switch. If you look at the Omidyar networks, and often a lot of these technological systems, they have a circle with a line. So that is also like a creative force, the arrows, like not quite an ankh, but a penetration and representing the emergence of this new thing. And so one of the lines in his speech, it says, the MAGA Republicans, that was hammered over and over and over. They have made their choice. They thrive on chaos. And so to me, it's very clear. Here's order, here's chaos. And we are managing, it is managed chaos with an expectation that we will move into this new direction.
Yeah. And all chaos is just people not, stepping outside of the dome, whatever that may be. But, he mentioned like the Trump and MAGA, I think like 5 times in the
More.
thing. Was it more?
It
it was a lot, but then it was kind of funny because then he would say, we need to, unite, and I'm everybody's president, and we need to come together, while he's, basically, demonizing a large percentage of the population. Not that I defend, like that political, point of view, I don't, but it was just interesting because it was completely contradictory
Right.
in that. President of all America.
Right.
Well,
But
and there
with
are
under the
plenty of
polarization.
people who are not. There are plenty of people who are not MAGA, but not proponents of Biden, and so it's this. The whole divisive nature of it. It was purposeful. It was to incite that kind, like I mentioned earlier. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned like a lot. I mean, Alison brought up the thing, politically homeless, and I think there are a lot of people that are just like, trying to find something, and some of them, maybe look to Trump for that, but but to paint it all with this brush is it's purposeful. It was intention. There's a purpose behind that.
Yeah. And I think that there are many people who sense that something's wrong. And I would say that it's probably, again, it's what story are we living in, right? And so when things are good and the economies are good, or there's a huge chunk of people that can live comfortably in a certain story and not have to get their feathers ruffled about it, right? Because they're just doing their life. They're taking the kids to school and they're going to work and they get the groceries and clean the bathroom, and they can coast like a lot. Again, I live in Philadelphia, so there's many people who we're a very poor city with a lot of huge issues, but people realize there are things that aren't right, and they don't know why they're not right, and they don't have all the information. And so they start to grasp at why they think it's not right. And so they might say, oh, I feel like our election was stolen, right? Like the whole democracy. And this is what I think is coming, is the whole protect our democracy. You could flip that into the other polarity and have the same people say the same thing, that they felt that their democracy was threatened, right? That the under threat goes both ways. Now, this
Right.
is the guy who gets to stand in front of Independence Hall and say it versus, which is not to say the next time it will flip out and it will be somebody on the other side saying it, but that the perception that there has to be a threat and that people have to be destabilized is really central. And people are concerned, but they don't have all the information. They're not informed enough, because there is a benefit in keeping people upset and confused and polarized and centered in themselves and in their own communities, and reinforced value systems, especially within the game theory, because they're using words and hashtags and sentiment analysis to game people, to literally tag people with attributes. Like you said, like he has MAGA Republicans, about 12 times at least. I mean, I ran out. I was trying to copy them all, and I couldn't fit them all on the page, but it was definitely more than 8, and it kept going. That is a dehumanization of a group of people to a tag, essentially to a metadata tag, right? And I think in an intentional way. Now, that's not to say that he's the only person that does that. That has become a pattern of behavior all the way around. That it benefits the AI system that we're living in, of cybernetics, of governance. Things can get a little out of hand, but they can't get too out of hand, and they get pulled back in. So this is just an image I have. One of them is a quote from a paper, and I included, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll share the link to the slides. And the paper is very interesting. It's talking about this life at the edge of chaos and looking at the work of Neal Stephenson. Now, later on, I'll have a slide about Neal Stephenson being part of one of these open metaverse webinar projects. But Neal Stephenson started writing about all of this in the early 90s, and he actually coined the term the metaverse in his novel Snow Crash. And so they're talking about how this idea of complexity theory emerges within the books. And then I have an image of a circuit that's this world homeostat advanced by Ervin Laszlo, who is a systems theorist. And that's the thing, like, I wish if we could zoom out and actually start to focus on the techniques, right? Like, it's not like just conservatives or just liberals study AI, right? Like, it's a mix of people who study these systems, and they're not just in the US, they're all over the world. And if we could understand it as techne, systems, electrical engineering, is this the way we want to live? Is this the world we want to live? And what will happen once it gets beyond our grasp? What will happen once it skitters off the edge? Then we could start to have a conversation that isn't polarized. And to me, that feels like there's a tremendous opportunity, but clearly this speech was not meant for that purpose.
Yeah. And then, well, I don't know when we'll get into it, but like, the discussion, there's been a little bit of discussion about democracy on the chat, and that's definitely, it was a major piece of this thing, assault on American democracy. This is an attack on democracy. So that was another thing that was repeated quite a bit. We need to choose between light and darkness, democracy's at stake, sort of thing. And so, like, the idea that we even have a democracy, someone said republic. We don't even have a republic because, do these people really represent you? The whole thing.
Well, in theory, we have a constitutional republic, but what I see is in the constitutional conservative circles, they will fight back. And I've done this myself, where I would say, no, we're not a democracy, and that my understanding was, and I talked to you about this, Alison, is that I was told, and that democracy results in mob rule, and so it circumvents and skirts the elected bodies. We're supposed to be represented by locally elected people but anyway, so I think that's important to note, that that's also that Hegelian kind of dialectic going on, where the two opposing things, no, we're a democracy, no, we're a constitutional republic, with the democratic process. And so
one is it's pointless because these people don't represent you anyway. So it's like,
because they don't represent us
everybody knows that.
In theory, they're supposed to. So yeah, and we weren't a two-party system when we were set up as a nation, but we are now. So all the things that were supposed to protect us are not really. And I will say, I got this today from the League of Women Voters, where I was a member for a number of years, because they were one of the few organizations that actually would tackle all this education stuff, like real issues. And even though I was the only technically conservative person in the group, I just got an email today. It says, voters say our democracy is their number one issue. Democracy, democracy, democracy. I've heard that for years. I'm saying that, and it always makes me cringe, because they're always talking about uniting to defend our democracy. There's no unity one direction or the other, but that's a term they're constantly using. And Alison, you mentioned the words that Biden was using did give the illusion of almost this sense of patriotism. And this is I think there were more dog whistles, but I'm hearing that more and more locally is that the Democrats are now using more American patriotic, democracy, freedom, all these words that customarily and generally you would hear from the right. And so it's an interesting reversal and a flipping of the narrative. And now it's just completely confusing to most, I believe.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I would just say, like, just one more thing on the democracy thing is to me, it's all it is it's a manufacture of consent. It's, hey, you voted, you had your say, and so you have to accept whatever happens. And that's really the only purpose for this thing. It's not democratic. It's not representative. It's not a representative republic. I mean, these are all complete lies. So to me, all it is just it's there to manufacture consent and to get people to behave.
Well, I always
Well,
feel bad about those who have children who have served in the military, or their, my grandfather or their parents who have served and given of their lives and their time, and so it's a difficult. That's another difficult thing to address, I guess, because you don't want to be disrespectful to those who have served, and they do it in good faith, and they do it because they want, they feel called to do that. Others use it as a tool for manipulation, and we know that the military has used our children and those who have served in our families. They've used them as pawns and tools, and there's been a lot of unnecessary death and wars and things, because most of them have been manufactured, and they're quite effective tools, as they said at the Transhumanism Association where we went, is they were saying wars are necessary. Yeah.
Well, he was saying that they're.
How are you going to do all that neuroprosthetic work if you don't have people to experiment on, right? Like,
right.
That's the thing. Like, it's terrible.
So it's just very sad. It's all terribly sad.
Sad.
Yeah, when the people have lost loved ones to this story, they're not. Oh, your loved one was killed for for something that it wasn't what they thought it was.
Right.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Well, I just want to sort of get back to on even the people who are more constitutionalists, and I just want to reiterate, like, I don't find many people interested in digging into what the smart contracts are. And this is something I repeat often, but to say, if you actually do believe in the Constitution, this smart contract layer that's coming is going to be a web that will keep you from ever getting to it. Like, you will be wrapped up in some sort of level of arbitration, automatic mediation, pseudo law. Like, you're not actually going to get down to whatever rights you believe you have down there unless you deal with the smart contract layer. And I don't really see the conservatives, the libertarians, the constitutionalists educating themselves about what's really happening. And unfortunately, I think a lot of them are sold on blockchain, because they imagine it's liberation or something. And so they're not really looking into the smart contract piece, which is frustrating. So I do.
Alison,
so
we talked about this. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's a delay.
No,
So I
go
talk
ahead.
over you. Well, I do talk about this, and I've been going all across Texas and talking about blockchain and this technology, and then I just talked about cryptocurrency earlier in the week, and we do get the questions about regulation, and so people do go there in their minds. And then one I did last week, somebody brought up the whole constitutionality of this, and so I am starting to see it compute, but they don't. Those who are actually imposing and working on the smart contracts, or the libertarians who say they want to shrink government and have this this new deregulated and decentralized economy, they don't talk about the constitutionality. So the Constitution, as far as I'm concerned, has already been, we're already, that ship has sailed. I don't believe that we live under we're not a country of laws, or we don't follow them, and now it's more rules and regulations. And
the regulations, the regulations will be embedded in the protocol, in the actual the language, the computer language that this whole thing runs off of, that's going to be the legal. It's not going to be an overt law, but it's a de facto law because it's the operating system. It's the protocol. So a lot of people don't think about that. This is the legal structures are being replaced by the protocols, the way that these cybernetic systems are going to be actually programmed and set up. So right. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Well, and I just want to say, so I didn't actually include a slide of this because I was kind of frantically putting this all together today, but I should have. One of the things that really helped me understand tokenization and governance was a talk. It was about an hour long that was honestly rather painful to listen to because it was but the content was really important. And it was sort of anarcho-socialism, blockchain government. And it was a woman who I think was connected to Arizona State University and with a systems theorist guy, computational guy in London, on essentially talking about like small villages, like smart villages, creating these holons. And it sort of had a libertarian bent. He would sprinkle in things about the gift economy and things that everyone would have a Linux server in their basement and we would have smart grids. And I don't think he said like next gen nuclear, but clearly these would be set up for next gen nuclear, with your tap off your radioisotopes out back. And he was this, I believe his name was Jeremy Pitt. And he talked a lot about the Greek city-state. And so for me, this is very interesting to see the rise of discussion of democracy in this context, because I'm also seeing it in other like major gifts. I was out at Johns Hopkins and the shipping magnates, is it Stavros Niarchos or Niarchos Stavros, gave like tens of millions of dollars to Johns Hopkins for like a Save Our Democracy Institute. So these democracy things are coming in. And the gentleman, Jeremy Pitt, with the smart tiny villages, self-governing villages, he said he was really inspired by a colleague, Josiah Ober, who's at Stanford, and he was a classics professor, and his whole thing was about like the Greek city-states and how they were governed. And like one of the framing within that was that the Greek city-states were effective because they had really robust knowledge management, meaning like not many people got to know what was going on, and they had really structured participation. And then Josiah Ober actually is working with Nicholas Berggruen on his initiative to essentially remake democracy. Like Nicholas Berggruen, he wants to remake what a human being is. He wants to remake capitalism, and he wants to remake democracy. And if you start putting these things together and you realize it's blockchain, it's all green energy, it's decentralization, it's tokens, it's based on a story we've been told maybe about classical Greece and what democracy is, but maybe it's not what we actually thought it was. And maybe it's something that's actually super repressive. And then you end up getting locked in your tiny village pod. But that's the thing when I see, this is just a quote, these are two pieces pulled from this speech. We're not bystanders in this ongoing attack on democracy. Again, they're not telling you where they're taking democracy. They're presuming that you presume that it's the thing that you've always known, not that you're going to be a tokenized avatar. There are far more Americans from every background and belief who reject the extreme MAGA ideology than those accept it. And folks, it is within our power, it is in our hands, yours and mine, to stop the assault. And then this was in a separate part of the speech. He says, and this is very compelling to me, this is where we set in motion the most extraordinary experiment of self-government the world has ever known. Now, I think experiment is really an interesting choice of words because, like, I know you could just maybe just roll it off like, no, we are in an experiment, guys. And self-government, you need to look at that in the context of cybernetics. And I have an image here taken from an exhibit on cybernetic serendipity, the politics of thinking machines, where literally they are looking at cybernetics as self-governing systems, as systems of self-government within limitations. And that's what this guy Pitt was talking about, was that these smart cities, like these little holons, would almost be like their own communal organisms. Like you would be a cell within this organism of a holon that is a village. And then, the reality is they hope that all of your data and all of your transacting on the blockchain will create a data layer that can feed the AI and create cognitive and digital twin models of your community so that the AI can learn you better towards the singularity. And this is very central to Project Cybersyn, which was in Chile. And, we were always told, like, again, and I'm no fan of the Chicago boys for sure. Like, you shouldn't go in and coup countries, but like Allende brought in this English systems theorist to run his planned economy on a computer. And so again, the old me that was leaning more left, I was like, oh, Chicago boys bad, Allende good. But I'm like, but if Allende is good, why is he going to the empire to bring in their machines to run his planned economy? Like, that doesn't sound right. And then once you get to the point where I'm at now, I'm like, oh, okay, the whole thing was like a polarizing play. The whole thing was a play. But how many people right now do you hear talking about in this democracy preservation program, what they actually plan for democracy, and two, where the heck this Project Cybersyn thing fit in, right? Because it didn't go away. Literally, it's coming back on blockchain. And I just don't see those conversations happening. Sorry, I was getting excited. Self-governance.
Lynn, do you want to chime in? You're muted.
I do that so I can type and not make noise. I don't want to get in trouble, Jason. Well, in thinking about this economy, this tokenized economy, I think there are questions in the chat. I thought it would be good for you to, when you mentioned Berggruen, because he wants to assign a value to each person, it is really where you are assigned a value just for being, and that's like universal basic income or something along those lines. And then I have another point.
Human capital.
What?
Human capital.
Oh, yes. Human capital. Right. And words matter. And so Alison and I were always talking about how words are, it's this duality and all these words that I've always thought, these are good words. Having values is good. You want morals and values. But now in thinking about and even currency and water and flowing and it just all, I look at words very differently now. What?
Banks.
Banks,
Currency,
yes.
and banks.
Well, and we talked about this the other day about value in terms of like a monetary or an economic value is extremely different than values, but it's the same word. But they're
right, but it's the same word.
They're actually.
I don't know. It's not going to be. I think they're going to quantify it all, Jason. Like literally, they're going to put a number on all your values and like put that into your twin. Like they're going to calculate it.
That's true, and I see that. That's why I try and help people understand that all this scoring at the local level, equity scoring or ESG scoring, and when I do these talks. It never fails that, oh yeah, the Chinese social credit score, and they're going to get us for Chinese, and China. And I always have to remind them, and I do it in a way that's not condescending, but yes, China could be a threat, and what's happening with social credit scoring, absolutely, that's a threat. But if you look at who's really imposing the threats on us, it's the locals, it's the locally elected people, it's those who, like with this equity scoring that we're doing in Dallas. These are the systems that are being put in place by our locally elected leaders, not some Chinese system. And so I think that's where Trump, and not to get in, the whole Trump thing, but I do believe leaders are selected, not elected. And I bought the lie about Trump. I thought that, he's not a politician and he's going to bust it all up. And, I knew his flaws going into it, but to me, it was better than Hillary's flaws. But Trump was pointing to China, and I think a lot of that was a major distraction. And when I speak to these local groups, they're mostly MAGA conservatives, and they're there and they genuinely want America to prosper. They genuinely want to do something to to help our country and to help people. And so I do see a real sincerity there. But the one lady was saying, well, Trump was coming up with his own system that was going to be the good blockchain or the good, and I forget what they call it. I know that there was talks about Nicera and Jacera and those who follow all that.
Is it the quantum blockchain or something?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. There, and like the whole QAnon thing is like there's millions of people following that, what's being fed there. And I never followed any of that stuff, although I get accused of it all the time. I didn't, but I know people who have, and so they're thinking that this new system is going to be counter to the beast system, and that Trump was creating it's not true. None of it's true, and so there's just a lot of misinformation, obviously. But Alison, you pointed out, it's like no one's talking about some of these things, and yet they are. We read the white papers. We just look at what they're putting out. They tell us exactly what they're doing, like Nicholas Berggren and the Berggren Institute, what they want, and then they impose it at the local level through chambers of commerce. And then you get the League of Women Voters, or this left, right, both sides are using the language, pushing the narrative, and that's how it comes in. It's not some distant threat like Klaus Schwab in China.
Well, also, I don't know if you're going to go into this, Alison, but the discussion about they're all across this country, they're trying to undermine the elections. The elections. So you have one side saying the elections are stolen, and but I'm like, all elections are stolen. Every single one of them. We haven't had a fair election, probably ever.
But and what's their solution to the stolen elections?
Once we have blockchain, we'll have a fair one.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Once we blockchain, it'll be totally fair. You'll get your vote. Your one vote will count because it's immutable, unhackable, and foolproof. But at the local, these groups that I meet with, I do point that out because that there, it's not that. Yeah, all elections are stolen. You're right, and so the solution is not more technology. The solution to the hacking and the technology was, but then they had that whole movie come out, 2000 Mules, to show, they're stuffing the ballots. Well, those were real videos of people doing that. That actually happened. It was real, but that wasn't really the major issue. And I don't mean to get off track, but it distracts from the technology that is behind the scenes.
Yeah, they have this solution they're ready for. They have their solution they're ready for.
That's right.
So this is an excerpt from this speech about paths. And so what I included an image here. Steffers has been doing a lot of looking into and following on her path a little bit, these Voronoi diagrams, which are these, essentially it's a way of mapping through algorithms, like spatial forms or web modeling. They use it a lot to build this metaverse thing and to connect like geospatial data and algorithmic. They use it for everything, really. Like they use it for health, gene sequencing, protein mapping, path planning. And so I have in this image, there's your rabbit there, Lynn, by the way. You've got there's a 3D modeled rabbit. This AI path finding. And so like finding an optimal path through a territory. And the idea with these Voronoi patterns is that you have a scattering of dots, and that at the equidistant point between any two dots is a line. And then it creates these unequal sort of polygons. But it's based on natural forms, everything from like your skin to an ear to the lines on a giraffe to like the shapes on a python. Those are all based on natural modeling patterns, and now they're using them in AI. And so when I saw this quote, it brought to mind the cybernetic path, and that the AI will chart your path, which is very much in line with, in the education space, all of the, cradle to career pathways. In the health space, it'll be a wellness pathway, or a mental health space, a social prescribing pathway. But it's the path. When you see path, that means they're engineering you on it. So this is from the speech. It says, but together we can choose a different path. We can choose a better path forward to the future, a future of possibility, a future to build a dream and a hope. And we're on that path moving ahead.
To infinity and beyond.
They've got you on the path. They're like, come get on my path. We're going places, right? Like, don't ask me where we're going. Just come. Like we're on a new path. And to me, that path is straight into the Ethereum merge and the open metaverse.
Yeah. I also want to say, we got to do the song, My Veroni. Do, 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 do. Come on. Ebony, come on.
I'm not the musical one.
We got to have some fun with this here. Yeah, I was fascinated with the Veroni. I kind of went down a little rabbit hole there with the Veroni patterns, and I'm like, how come I've never heard of this? Like, because it's a pretty, I mean, it's a pretty significant understanding, like of patterns, and I've always, I've got a book that I got back in high school on fractals. I've always been fascinated with these patterns, and I just the Veroni thing never came across my view.
You know what? My connection is not that great. I don't know if you can turn down the resolution for me or something.
Sure. Yeah.
Does that work?
Yep.
Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah, we're getting to rush hour, so everybody comes home probably and is getting online.
How's that? Can you see it?
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. So this is the thing that I think is interesting about like what you were saying, Lynn, about Trump. So I'm equating this, the lens I'm using here, and not everyone will use the same lens, but is like within the background of blockchain emergence coming online. And so one of the quotes says, and yet history tells us that blind loyalty to a single leader and a willingness to engage in political violence is fatal to democracy, right? And so you see blind loyalty. So that's sort of the VR like containment, and a single leader. So the whole thing about the blockchain governance is that it's horizontal, that's decentralized. If you read about it, they're always saying it's non-hierarchical. That's why it's like the anarcho-socialist eco-village, nuclear eco-village. It's non-hierarchical. Like you won't be dominated because we'll all just be nodes in the thing. And so I feel like that whole thing was the setup, right? Of like, well, you can have hierarchical leadership to someone that we are going to call unstable, or you could have just equal nodes. And then the other piece that I know you are on top of the word resilience, because this is part of the smart city, like twinning stuff for Dallas, is that there's another quote that says, so we the people will not let anyone or anything tear us apart. Today, there are dangers around us that we cannot allow to prevail. And so when I see tearing apart, to me, that feels like a resiliency, right? Like you want something that is enmeshed, that is tight, and that is going to bounce back, right? That won't be torn apart. And that is more like a synthetic structure, or a distributed network structure. And so I see these visuals, again, within the catalyzing, the assaults and the violence and the pushback, those are both things that in the background, like the blockchain's going to solve those problems. Yeah, nobody's tearing you apart if you're on the blockchain. It's a permanent ledger, baby. Like we're all resilient.
So there's a question asking about digital ID and twin, and your twin being built in the public school system. Do you want to address that in this section?
Sure. I mean, I can bring it up. I mean, essentially for me, if you look up Clever, there's a clip that I often show that's a short 2-minute clip from rocket ship charter schools where they're with kindergartners using these Clever badges that have QR codes. And it's an interoperable identity. So within the school space, the use case, because they always create this use case, right? Oh, we have a classroom with 32 5-year-olds, and how are they ever going to remember their passwords? Well, now we have the solution. Here's just a little credit card thing with a QR code and their name. And every time they log into a program, which, how many programs, 20 programs, they hold up their thing to the camera and it takes the picture and it logs them in automatically. But then all of the data in behind in the dashboard is going to develop their digital twin. And increasingly, the programs aren't just cognitive. They're going to also be evaluating social skills, mental health skills, I'm sure whatever surveys they embed in the schools, because all of those are impact markets. And so, and the thing is, I know you've talked, Lynn, you might be able to say better about Greenlight. So when you get up to that level with these blockchain mastery transcripts, in Dallas, they're using them as like the early enrollment community college, like the 11th and 12th graders sign up to take advanced classes at community college. Then they get a blockchain transcript that through Greenlight, which is not only including their coursework, but things like if you go on into the associate's degree program, they could coordinate your wraparound services through that thing, right? They could coordinate your fitness. They could coordinate, like, if you need, I don't know, food assistance or these other things. Like, they're looking to integrate all of that into the app.
Yeah, and it won't. It's not necessarily a digital ID so much as it is a digital wallet. It's a digital transcript, what they call your life locker. And so within that life locker, there are all these different categories or these components to it that Greenlight will hold, and that will be your mental health data, your vaccine history, your transcripts, and your credentials as they move us to this competency-based model where not only the students but the teachers will earn badges and micro credentials to show that they're continuously improving and learning in this lifelong learning system. But then there's also the fitness data, and through the Cooper Aerobics Center, they're tracking the physical fitness of students on blockchain, and that will be scaled statewide.
Yeah.
Someone on the comment section said they're 44. I work a regular job and stay off of social media. How will they build my digital twin? How do I get to consent control my twin? Well, that's one of the things they're going to say. You're going to be able to control your own data, and that's we should do a whole show about the myth of that. But you already have, like, right in Colorado, you have digital ID. I could go get my driver's license on my phone now if I want, but it's already there whether I have it on my phone or not. So it's like you're being pushed into these systems whether you like it or not, and your access, even to, like, I talked to someone recently who wanted to go to a baseball game, and they wanted to just buy a ticket, and they wouldn't let they didn't want to download the app or put the ticket on their phone. And so they couldn't, their friends went into the game. They didn't get to go to the game because they required them to have their phone. So I think, and it obviously it's going to be increasingly so for younger generations, than us old folks. But,
yeah. And part of being a ringe of the ears, so to speak, or provide resistance is exactly what they're doing, staying off of social media and throwing off. I mean, if you're not participating in these systems, which I'm totally guilty of, then that's one way to stave it off.
But the metaverse is going to be overlaid on the actual world, and you're not going to be able to, park your car. Like I was at the Smart Cities conference, and they had a presentation about how great it is because they're moving away from, like, paid meters, and it's all just done with geo-tracking in your phone, and you just pull in and you'll automatically be charged. You have to set up an account, but you're not going to be able to escape it because it's this digital system. It's being overlaid on top of the real world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And their goal is to have, like, a single sign-on for the internet. And so I think if you, the low simmer boil in the, like, political violence, fatal, scary threat is that, like, there is such a scary thing going on. Like, we don't know who might pop off and do something really terrible. So we need to get we need to have everything logged on all the time so that the AI can monitor and tell, like, might do something that we don't like. Right. And so soon, it's hard to say, but this was in the Global Education Futures map. There will be a sign on to the internet that will track. And then eventually there will be things that you won't be able to do unless you log onto the internet. Like you like Jason said, buy a ticket to the baseball game. Like, you won't be able to pay your gas bill, our friend Deepti, they had that in India, that it all went digital. And if you didn't have the infrastructure, you literally couldn't pay your gas bill. So these things are going to get tighter and tighter. And I just don't think that I mean, for the most part, lots of people are just doing their life and they feel like it's convenient, and they don't think that, well, I wouldn't ever do anything wrong. So like, why would this be a problem for me? And they don't realize that ultimately the plan is to push many vast numbers of people out of work. Once they get you online and locked in, they can do that because they can follow you around and see what you're up to, and then to like push you into public assistance. And so many people who are like, well, I'm throwing away my smartphone. No, if you're poor and you need to register for unemployment, like, or if you're at a certain level, they're going to give you a phone because that's your jail warden, you know, and that's what the Obama phones were for. And you know, I have a friend who's, you know, on long-term disability and was able to kind of clue me in on how this works. Like this idea, like, oh, you're just going to throw away your phone and it's not going to be a thing. I'm like, no, because eventually it isn't going to be your phone. It is going to be a wearable. It's going to be an implantable thing. Like it's going to be a retina. It's going to be something, it's behavioral biometrics. This backscattered radiation, they're just going to know you, especially once they get the next gen nuclear up and they start tapping you off with the isotopes. They're just going to be able to track you wherever you are. So I'm not trying to be emphatic, but I think there's a lot of people who feel very superior about making certain choices. And I'm like, yeah, like for sure. Like, do
Like
what
buying
you can,
land or
understand
growing
what
a
it's telling.
garden.
Yeah. Do the resistance because it makes you feel good, not because you think you're ultimately escaping it all. Okay. So, so this is from the Reiser's World Sensorium. I have a screenshot of a section of the book, and it says social unrest is inevitable so long as this process of differentiation continues, for there can be no stability until the embryonic maturity is reached. So this is 1946, y'all, about the social unrest, right? Like they're going to keep people stewing like until they accomplish their crazy like world sensorium program. And so the social unrest is part of the recipe. Like when you're playing out the polarity and being mad at your fellow human being for maybe not being exactly aligned with you, like you're just doing their job for them because that's what they want. So, you know, I pulled a quote here that just says, this is from the Biden speech. They look at the mob that stormed the Capitol on January 6th, brutally attacking law enforcement, not as insurrectionists who placed a dagger at the throat of our democracy. And that's quite a visual, I think. That's an intended visual, a dagger at the throat of our democracy. But they look at them as patriots. So I'm going to go on and talk about the dagger. So I didn't realize, because I'm pretty checked out on a lot of the political stuff, that the tour that they were doing in 2020, the Biden-Harris tour, was called Battle for the Soul of a Nation, which is a bit over the top, guys. But like, I didn't realize that the soul thing wasn't just for this speech, that this is something that they've had in their pocket for some time, which I think it actually very much connects to the soul-bound tokens, these Ethereum tokens that are going to be used as metadata tags. But going back to this idea of the knife at the throat in the metaverse, knowing that in the background is the open metaverse, the plan, like follow us on the pathway, we're going places, right? Like get on the pathway of self-governance, right? I had read the Philip Pullman series, which is a children's book series of a girl, Lyra, and it's sort of across different time zones, and in this she meets her a young boy, a tween, early young teen boy named Will, and they have this engagement in a town that is in another reality, and they end up in an engagement where he gets this knife. It's called the subtle knife, and he's injured in this, and so he's the knife carrier of this knife. And what this knife can do is actually cut through the field. Like it can cut into different realities. And so I think, even though I know it's probably going to sound kind of out there, like there are these questions about string theory, parallel realities, other dimensionality. I mean, this is something that they've really been looking at. And also within the story, the children in the series, they have something called a daemon or demon, which is like a pet, an animal that is their friend. And it's an embodiment of their soul, right? So this is how I feel like it connects to the soul. And the evil, woman is trying to cut away the souls from the children. And they're using this process to sever their soul from the children for this certain purpose. And at one point, this bad guy goes up to the North Pole, and he sacrifices this little boy by taking his soul away to open a portal into a new realm. And so there is something, I feel like, about this energetic engagement and assault on children in the metaverse. Like, whether I'm not saying that I'm living in a science fiction book, but there is something energetically about the focus on the youth and bringing them into the metaverse, bringing them into this photonic optic thing. And this idea of a knife and the cutting away of the spiritual part of yourself, the severing of you from that which makes you whole, which I think is what these avatars are meant to do. So I'll just read this quote, Lynn, and I'll turn it over to you. Mm-hmm. It's from the Biden speech. I ran for president because I believed we were in a battle of the soul of this nation. I still believe that to be true. I believe the soul is the breadth, the life, and the essence of who we are. The soul is what makes us us. And again, in 2020, these people, especially Kamala Harris, who is from San Francisco, knows exactly what Mark and Laura Andreessen and the Silicon Valley Venture Capital, funds and the Silicon Valley Community Foundations, like that's her world. She knows the world of the metaverse. She hangs with those people. Those are her people. And so literally they're standing up in front of you saying that the soul is everything, knowing that the most powerful interests in the world, like in the US and beyond, are interested in flattening you out into a cyborg avatar and throwing you into the metaverse. And to me, that's the deception. And I'm not saying it's just the Democrats that are deceiving, because I think the conservatives are deceiving just as well. And like we've seen that in Texas with how they talk about it. They're not being straight with people either. And that's why if I seem frustrated sometimes with people like not getting it or deciding to like make choices about what they'll talk about and not talk about the cyber physical world and not talk about blockchain and not talk about immersive reality, that it is a total CIA mind fuck, that like I get anxious because it matters and it's coming and they know, and like there's not enough of us.
Yeah, not even close.
Well, and on that, so last week, I went to the Texas Education Agency, and I've been trying to get rid of the commissioner, and we really need to eliminate his role, or that he's appointed by Governor Abbott, and most of his speeches, he knows who his audience, and he can be whatever you want him to be, depending on who that audience is. When he's with conservatives, he will, and even when he's just giving a general speech, it's faith sounding words. The 5.5 million souls, and he talks about the angels in the classroom being the teachers, and all these faith words, and he'll say the least of these. I mean, that's based on scripture, and those are little signals he's sending to those who are Christians to say, I'm one of you. I can't overtly say it, but he does this. And before he gave his opening remarks, which is why I was there to testify at the state board, is that he opens up knowing that there's a lot of heat on him right now, and conservatives have started paying attention to what's happening in education. And he did that on purpose. And hearing all of this about the souls is for years I've been saying that they when they talk about the whole child, they want the whole child. Yeah. And those who are saying, no, the whole child model doesn't just look at the academics, it also addresses the social and emotional needs of children. And we want to look at the whole child. If they're hungry, then they can't learn. Of course. Who would argue that, about that? But it's a manipulation, and it is to access the souls, the mind, the body, the whole child, and it is an access point. And then one last thing I wanted to say is just on the when you were talking about this the battle of the soul that they used with Biden's campaign, is that it's the battle that people take that as our soul, that this is a spiritual, or this is like a moral, some sort of moral ethical kind of thing, but really it's about accessing souls. It's the battle that they want, the souls, not that it, so it's the reverse. So it's just all of these this, like you said, mind the people, and that's exactly what's happening. And the children are a target because you can get them earlier, and the entry and access point through technology in the schools is the perfect tool.
Yeah.
Put them in the metaverse.
There you go. Yep, that's the big rabbit hole I fell in, right?
Lynn, this is that image.
And
I just realized that you had sent me this.
Oh yeah.
If you want me to bring it up to talk about, do you want to do that now?
Where was that, Alison? The global education
that was global
futures.
education futures. Yeah, Pablo.
I know, where on this chart is that?
And art.
But you mentioned that on there was one of the pieces on there. Oh, maybe it was I don't know. I can't remember.
Some of it was like Family University. I mean, everybody's going to be stuck on the blockchain, right? I mean, forever, so that the AI can sit on your shoulder, and that's dehumanized, and it's decentralized, and they'll call that like resilient and independent and equal and whatever. But it's isolating. You wrote that lovely essay about the heart. Those people are so far apart. There's no heart energy. Nobody's hugging anybody over there. Like, nobody has any humanity in these images. It's terrible.
Right.
And yeah, people have to understand, like, if you're fighting for your liberty and your liberty looks like blockchain and it looks like that, then you should revisit, like, maybe you should get up to speed of what's really actually going on.
True.
So, just to reiterate, I thought a pretty good overview about what was happening in California and the digital identity space and the rollout of these soul-bound tokens that were connected to Ethereum. And the difference between a soul-bound token and an NFT, now that's a very charged word. And then the image above, like it definitely, the Ethereum are these like platonic solids. It looks sort of incantation-like. I mean, there's a lot of metaphysical stuff going on. And I know, Jason, you said in that space, in the gaming space, like that's sort of the language that people use. But the soulbound token differs from an NFT, a non-fungible token, in that it is assigned and it could be revoked, but it can't be given away. And so as I understand it, and this was, Buterin and this guy, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember his guy, the Microsoft Octopest, like the research guy, and this woman, Pooja Olhaver, like they rolled out this paper about soulbound tokens. Like, I'm not buying that they wrote the paper. Like, I think this stuff has been sitting in the background waiting for its time to make its usher, stage come in, stage left. But these soulbound tokens, I imagine them as metadata tags, and they're going to be used to tag people for what online learning programs they did, what interventions they got, what food they got. Like, there are going to be all of these tokens that are going to be part of the digital twinning process, and they could be revocable too. So like if some of the scenarios I've been talking about is that you have to wake up and issue a morning deposit in your smart toilet to decide if the AI is going to let you out of the house. Like, you might get a daily soulbound token that they can take away if your specimen doesn't meet mustard of whatever the newest AI equation says about the sewer, analysis.
The portal potty.
The portal.
It's a really shitty plan.
Yeah. Poop coin.
Right. But the soul, like, again, like, all of the people in Silicon Valley, all the blockchain people knew when he was talking about soul, what he meant. There's all a double meaning in this. And I believe that the soul-bound tokens are really central. And I mentioned before about sacred ground. So my skill set is cultural landscape. And so last Labor Day, actually, I ended up going out to this square, which is at the base of the Ben Franklin Bridge. And again, Ben Franklin, founding father, total Freemason, right? Total Freemason, founder of Penn, which, as Roz Ben says, he thinks, Ben Franklin opened the gates of hell in Philadelphia. And that's probably largely Penn with ENIAC and their gene therapies and their impact finance and their blockchain and all of the other stuff. But so there's a statue commemorating Ben Franklin at the base of the Ben Franklin Bridge, and you might not be able to see it, but there's a green, it's up near the top, there's a green circle, and then the road veers around it. It's very odd because this is a major highway and a bridge, and there's no reason that they wouldn't have just fixed the road, that it would go around this park, but it does. And I think it's an energetic aspect to that. And so actually that's Washington, not Washington, Franklin Square. And then next to it is the sculpture, this crescent. And the road just spins. There's all this traffic. It's very energetic. And Isamu Noguchi created a proposal for a sculpture, like a while ago. I want to say in the 30s, maybe, when he was young. And they didn't have the money to build it, and they didn't have the engineering to build it. But essentially, it was an abstracted kite with a lightning bolt that hit a key, and then the key was mounted on a four-sided pyramid wireframe. And to me, when I saw that, that looks like the nature, the lightning captured between the man-made objects of the kite and the key, and that the key itself is the digital identity, and that the pyramid underneath is the metaverse. And so it's like this portal of this energetic shock into the metaverse. And I feel like that's where we're at. So at like 3 blocks north of Independence Hall, where the speech was given, is this statue. It's very big. It's maybe, I don't know, at least 4 stories high. It's a tall sculpture. It's very significant, but no one ever goes there because it's surrounded by traffic. So I went there one day and I burned a terrible essay by Ben Franklin that was like really racist. And I burned it in a pot and laid out a whole heart with like fungi and flowers and things or whatever. And I can put the link to that in the comments. But so this is he talks about being on sacred ground. He says, I speak to you tonight from sacred ground in America, Independence Hall in Philadelphia, PA. And then that sacred flame still burns. Now, on our time, let's see, as we build America, this more prosperous, free, and just, this is the work of our presidency, I believe, with my whole soul. So this sacred flame, the sacred ground. And it is true that because of the imprinting of Philadelphia, this is in the historic part of the city. Again, a lot has been built up, but there are key faith-based institutions. And what's coming in this impact finance program to get the data, the religious institutions and the nonprofits are going to be the ones to impose the soul-bound tokens, right? Like literally, they're going to be the ones doing it, and they're all going to be unified across faiths through, probably like the Baha'i or an ecumenical, a world church, an ecumenical movement that respects science and rationality, and that they will be the part of the governance mechanism. So the American Friends Meeting House is there. Mikveh Israel, which is the oldest synagogue in the city, is there. The Katz Judaic Studies Center is right there. About 3 blocks away is Christ Church, which is the oldest Anglican church. And then a few blocks the other way is the oldest Catholic church. So I've got these maps that sort of show where these elements are in proximity to Independence Hall. And they're all within 4 or 5 blocks.
Hey, I'll be right back. Just don't mind me. I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah. So
wait,
on
Alison,
this one,
the original?
Yeah.
The original logo of, you remember me sharing that with you? It looked like the kite. It was the original logo of IEEE. And then they used to be called, but anyway, it has that. I remember discussing the Franklin, key mythology and the electricity and kite and all that.
Yeah. And the key, I believe, is the digital identity. And so for me on this map, in addition to the American Bible Society, because again, the Bible, that is an imprinted message. So that's all, the Jewish History Museum. There is a lot of stuff going on at Independence Mall. And interestingly enough, right next door to it is the Center for Roman Haas, which was a major chemical company. And just down the way was originally the Chemical Heritage Society that was curating all of the patents that were taken from Germany in World War I of all of their toxic weapons and chemicals. So there's this strange juxtaposition of like encoded religious groups, power centers, chemicals, and the Philosophical Society is next to Independence Hall, and then next to that is the Second Bank, which was one of the first attempts at a central banking system. And then this is just a little bit further south. It's also still the Liberty Bell, but I just have the images of the different churches. Again, the Quakers. Now, the synagogue is it actually is this Portuguese Spanish synagogue, and that's connected to the synagogues that came by way of the Netherlands to Brazil to New York to Philadelphia. And so there it's a Spanish Portuguese ritual. And again, the Netanyahu family at the time had, when they lived here briefly, when Benjamin Netanyahu went to high school at Central High School in Philadelphia. So they had an affiliation with that church, but it was on North Broad Street at the time. And then we have Old St. Joseph's, which is the original Catholic church from the 1830s, I believe. It's early. I think Baltimore actually had the earliest one, but they have St. Joe's Prep, which is sort of an all-male preparatory school that two of our What Works mayors, Michael Nutter and Jim Kenney, both were graduates of the Prep. They call it the Prep. And I was at an ed tech conference there a while ago, and it was really heavily encoded. And, they were all about, was it Barron Trump's special school? Because he had some autism stuff, and it was all about like mindfulness and executive function. It was quite creepy. So this is the landscape of where this is. On the left is Cesium Geospatial. That's the farthest left dot. That's the geospatial analytics where they're building the open metaverse. At the bottom line there is Lombard Street. It's important to know that Lombard Street in London was the center for Quaker banking. And I think Roll had written on that about, or done a tweet about it, about Lombard Street, the Lombards. And then also the Philadelphia Contribution Ship, which is the oldest property insurance company, Jason. So I think that's Ben Franklin, the fire insurance, right? You paid your insurance premium and the people run out if your house catches on fire. But the Philadelphia Contribution Ship is a really significant, important insurance company. And that's part of a lot of this parametric insurance conversation that we've been having.
And that will be, by the way, I apologize on my volume. I look at the meters, but I can't hear my own volume. So let me know how someone who has mentioned my levels were like higher than, so yeah, just feel free to make comments about that and I can try to adjust accordingly. But yeah, our parametric insurance conversation is actually going to happen next week. So we rescheduled the second part of that.
Yeah. So this is back to world sensorium. And if you imagine what we're talking about, bioelectronic, and Lynn has this great essay about the torus and the heart field and the energetics. But again, we're in a material body. And these people imagine that the material body is a mess. It's like the Bernal guy, he wants to put his brain in a cylinder and live with crustacean haptics and chemical sensory things, that's going to be better. But I think we're here in our regular physical body to do the things we're meant to do in the time we have while we're in this form. And so they're trying to just cast that aside and in towards a light-based being, right? And I think that is built into some of this new age ascension narrative, right? There's the mechanical version, maybe there's the love and light version, but it is this ascension away from any kind of material beingness. So I'm just going to read this. This is the World Brain quote from Oliver Reiser. If there were no resurrection from the forms of the past, humanity's age-long struggle toward light and life would indeed be an abortion of the giant social embryo, the planetary being which is to come. It is my hope that scientific humanism may not only provide the seminal principle for the earth ovum, but serve also as the mental guiding field for embryogenesis, so that the viable offspring of the planet's own quickening effort shall be the spirit of mankind incarnate, the planetary logos made flesh in a world sensorium. That's a lot.
That is a lot. And you always talk about this being a kuon god, and just thinking about, I come from the perspective of Christianity and what the Bible is telling us, and there's all kinds of references to the earth being in labor, or they mention labor pains, and a lot of what's it's the pain and the suffering and the curse of labor, but also as the gift. But this is I don't even have words for it. It's creepy. And
Well,
after coming from that
yeah.
that Mormon Transhumanism Association conference that we went to, there was a lot of talk about us becoming gods, and our, being that God uses and gives us the technology so that we may become gods, which that flies in the face of Christianity. But there are a lot of similarities, and scripture is used and woven in. And so I think a lot of that is a false light, not to go after, Mormons and Latter-day Saints, but what they are wanting to do with technology, to me, is a false light and a false, and the coup on God that you talked about.
Well, there was a line even in Biden's speech about like moving from darkness and going into the light or something. Do you remember that? Yeah, I should have wrote the actual the thing down specifically, but
and that stuff that's all prophesied in the Bible, and you can read Revelation and it'll tell you about the false Messiah and that in the mark of the beast, and it talks about all of those things. That it's interesting to see that so much of the things that we thought were so far out are actually right here and moving quickly.
Someone said something that said they aren't Christians. I don't know who they're referring to. So just to let you guys know, each of us has a little bit different background in terms of like faith practices and stuff. So it's great because we have we're coming at this from different angles.
Well, I just want to say too, so this is Reiser's other book that I'm like, I only got like a third of the way. It's hard. This is a hard one. World Sensorium is a pretty easy read. This one is a lot more about physics. It's really theoretical and challenging, but it's called Cosmic Humanism. And so when you see there where he's talking about scientific humanism, and I think there's also like a secular humanism, that there are a number of faith practices that are kind of aligned with the like Protestant dissident, like coming out of England, like among the Quakers and also the Unitarians and the Universalists, that have this more rational, reasoned approach, advanced like ethical humanism or secular humanism, and uplifting science and uplifting the knowledge of man over God, kind of like that's the framing. And so I think I just want to point that out because later I have a couple slides about the Unitarians, because within this space, and for me, my angle is always that this is a sacred engagement of people around the world. The metaverse is a global project. And so our challenge is to be authentic to our own cultural and faith practices, question the institutions, hold on to like our inner core, and act with like truth and love towards one another and towards the world. So I'm not here to tell people to pick one or the other. But mindfulness and some of the Western co-optation of the tradition of yoga is sort of part of that. And the people who brought this guy Yogananda to the U.S. to sort of advance really a manifest your future kind of program that's still based out in Los Angeles, like they were the Unitarians brought him, because again, it was a world religion. And I don't want world religions to fight each other. I mean, I don't want war. I want us to have mutual respect. But what I think they're looking at is to use science and a reasoning framework to flatten everything out and make everybody like everything else and homogenize things so that they can put it into the smart contracts and essentially code for it, like create some sort of universal sacred code to create this embryogenesis organism of information. And so anyway, I just wanted to sort of put that out there.
Would you say they're blinding us with science?
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Blinded me with science.
All you 80s kids out there.
Yeah, we'll have to
stay with us.
Thomas Dolby.
And this is just a bit, I just stuck this in, but a lot of what I'm looking at is the radio eugenics, and Reiser spoke about that. Thomas Jefferson Hospital is a teaching hospital that, again, is about 4 blocks from Independence Hall. And, you know, I read this book, Life Atomic. I feel like the history of radioisotopes and the Atomic Energy Commission is really relevant to this human plus plan of like extended longevity and precision medicine. Like eventually they're going to come up and try to make us all top off with radioactive isotopes and to get our superpowers and you know, our soul-bound token superpowers. And I thought it was important to note that the early radioisotope work was done at Berkeley, which is not a surprise because Berggrun's Transformation of the Human Project is not far from Berkeley. And John Lawrence, not John Lawrence, maybe John Lawrence. The two brothers, there were 2 brothers Lawrence. One was at UCSF and one was at the Lawrence Lab. But they had a cyclotron in the 30s, and they got these isotopes that they could use to track things, track and trace. That's what the isotopes were, to track metabolic processes. And he would give them away. I was telling Jason, it's interesting, an interesting use of the gift economy. So they would give the isotopes to people like Niels Bohr or people they wanted in their network, almost like an extension of favors to build up their network of people trading in radioisotopes and who owed one another favors and to build their community. And they didn't want to sell them because they didn't want just anyone to be able to have them. They wanted to control it. So during the Second World War, they really had like even more limited access. The cyclotrons offered far fewer radioisotopes than later after the Cold War, and they could use the like Oak Ridge National Labs to create like massive amounts of nuclear medicine. But they didn't have that much. And so they could only pick 5 places to send their radiophosphorus. And among the 5 was Jefferson College. So I feel like in the tagging and the tracing and the emergence of this nuclear program, that's like Philadelphia is right there in the mix, has been for a long time. And weirdly, so the like 3 blocks the other direction is that Chemical Heritage Society that it's now called something else, like the Science Institute or History Institute, that was managing the secured German patents of chemicals. And this was over in the University City Science Center in West Philly near Penn. It was one of the first research labs, urban research campuses for technology. And there was this gentleman, I think Eugene Garfield, it's on the next slide. He commissioned actually a holographic world brain. So here Reiser's talking about the world brain. This guy literally, his focus was on like essentially organizing all the scientific information, organizing it all before really cloud-based computing back in the like 60s. And he commissioned this holographic world brain for the lobby of his building where they had the computers to do all of the gathering of all of the data and information. And then it got moved over to the Chemical Heritage Society. But can you guys read his name? I can't read it on the top left.
Let me give it.
Eugene Garfield, maybe? Is that right? I think it's Eugene Garfield.
Let me give you a little bit more action here. Here we go.
My old eyes cannot see all the things.
How about that?
Yeah. So yeah, Eugene Garfield, and he was known as the father of scientometrics and bibliometrics. And I think if you think about like, again, Elsevier, Pergamon Press, all these people who are compiling all the scientific data and organizing it all, they're imagining that they're organizing it all to stick it into whatever that world brain thing is. And like, it's interesting, Lynn, because I'm looking at the bottom, I see world brain, and there's like a little pyramid and then these like triangulations over like a walking figure. But evidently this was all done with light. And I think it might have been made somewhere in Texas. So now, again, we're talking about light. We're talking about like emergence through tokenized democracy and the world brain. And there it is, like just down the block.
Well, and what I think is so interesting about that is when I was doing all that research about the heart being a torus, so you could almost unroll it in the way that it pumps is in kind of this circular, but it almost moves like a donut the way it goes out and twists. So the brain is also a torus, and the earth is a torus with the magnetic field. So this is just all very strange. And thinking
there's
of
this
those
Talbot
terms.
book about like holographic reality. And there's some questions again about field theory, and is the universe closed or is it open and continuous of frequency, right? And so the cyberneticists need for it to be closed because they need to control it. Like there's no way to control a holographic universe that extends forever. Like they're just not going to be able to do that. So they need for us to inhabit the story that it is a cybernetic closed loop, which is, when we had that clip from the Kavli Center, it's like the rat running in the torus. Like, oh, by the way, the rat can't get out. No matter what he does, he can't get out. And I'm like, well, I think they're making that story up. I don't know that we have to live in the story that they're telling.
Yeah. But with the world brain, we've talked about this a lot, and I actually have used this when I'm presenting to people. I say it's as if there is there is the swarm AI and the hive mind, and that world brain, you can see it, and they do it through education, is that everyone is supposed to be singing from the same hymn. We're all supposed to be moving in the same direction. The same language is happening all across the world. And people like Andreas Schleicher with the OECD, he goes all across the globe telling everybody this is how you should do things. And yeah, that's a perfect whatever the word is.
I made the screen a little bit too big, but
yeah.
But they have so if you look at the heart center, and the EMF extension of the heart is 8 feet. If you look at you could probably pull something up really fast, just do EMF of the heart, and all those pictures will show that same torus and that same donut around the heart.
Yeah. I'm looking 1 second.
And so I just wanted to include this slide just talking about like Bitcoin being characterized as an organism, like a new kind of organism, decentralized. And I think in some of the stuff, like because it's this network, they want to relate it to a mycelial network, like the fungal networks, and make it organic.
Now is the mushroom portion of the show.
And but you don't hear that many people talking about Bitcoin as an organism, right? But I think that's really central. And then the other piece is that you've got the Melanie Swans out there saying, oh, well, we can use the blockchain to get into a cloud mind, which is the hive mind. But people might think that that's just something that's like a vague thought. But they're actually literally working on building it out as we speak. And so, I mean, that was from 2016. They're talking about the future of brain-computer interfaces, blockchaining your way into a cloud mind, where literally your thoughts become tokenized. Like every single thing, every single part of you, every neuron, blinky blink of like the rat running in the torus, the blinky blinks of the brain become a currency, literally.
I found this. Is that what you were thinking, Lynn?
Oh, hang on, I'm on the wrong one. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, and then it also reminds me of an apple. You'll see, the apple split it in half in the core. So that's just the whole Eve, the apple, education, apple, technology, apple, fruit.
Yeah. I did the apple. Yeah. Okay. So let me see.
It's just all rotten.
Okay. So this is augmented democracy. I mean, this is Cesar Hidalgo. He was at MIT. He's moved on, I think, to France. But this idea that we have a digital twin that's participating in radical decentralized democracy, and it's quite interesting to me. You can't really see the faces of these robots. That each person has their own robot, but there's like an eye, like a glowing eye. So it is this optic, photonic, light-based system, right? And everyone's supposed to be participating and in this collective decision. And that's what's coming up is like this, as much as the imperative is like violence, afraid, threat, we have to worry. Like they need us in this agitated state because like there's terrible problems and we have to solve all the problems now and like get your tokens, people, and it's funny because I even remember, back in the day, the really basic version of, I don't know. Can you guys hear me? I think it looks like I've frozen.
We hear you.
Can you see me?
Yeah, we see you.
Okay. All right. It's frozen on my, okay. It froze for a second. Sorry. That like you would have chart paper with different choices. Like people would write ideas and they'd go, okay, everybody, here's your 5 stickers. Go vote. right? And that's what they want to start doing with these tokens. But then the AI learns all of the stuff. They'll learn who put what token. Did you put 3 of your dots on that thing? And they'll log that into your digital profile, and they'll remember that you really care about that thing, so that 10 years later, when you change your opinion, they'll remember that you used to care about it and you don't anymore. And so this is all going into the machine system. But when we talk about saving democracy, nobody's talking about that. Like, literally, I even went and because this is going to be the Estonia, like, e-resident of the metaverse, right? You're just literally a tokenized avatar resident of some sort of collective digital realm. And like, this guy did a webinar, and I kind of tried to chime in the comments, and he was talking about economic modeling in Brazil. And I'm like, dude, you know that there's really not going to be a national model that's meaningful moving forward. You're going to put everything in the metaverse. The multinational companies are already in the metaverse, and pretty soon all the politicians will just be standing in front of a computer. Like, they won't be real. They'll only just be there for spectacle. So what are you talking about? But they can't own up to it. Like, in public, they can't. They have to pretend like you're still doing an economic forecast for Brazil. Like, that matters.
Well, even like Biden's speech, he said, battle for American soul. But like, he also said, like, which is interesting. He says, we want this to be another American century. That was one of the things that George Herbert Walker Bush said, pretty much the same thing. Like, we want this to be another, but again, like, once you understand the metaverse and the digital world, it's like, it's very strange, because it's clear, like, that the mythology of America, whatever that is not going to be as significant. So what's your thought on that? Like, in terms of still promoting
That was my last slide.
Oh, okay. We'll get to it.
I have that on my last slide.
All right.
Can we wait? I know, Lynn, you're going to have to hop off pretty soon. I mean, are there some things that I don't want to take up all your time?
Yeah, I found that Lynn,
thoughts
that image that you had sent me to, the League of Women Voters, that democracy.
Lincoln there. Lincoln's sitting there. And
Lincoln,
we're gonna end our democracy. Give now. 59 days to election. Yeah, I mean, they're all saying mostly the same thing, just different ways.
Yeah. So this is just sort of my slide talking about the synthesis of both sides, that I feel like both sides are going to fall into the blockchain voting. The quote from the Biden speech was, "I will not stand by and watch the most fundamental freedom in this country, the freedom to vote and have your vote counted and be taken from you and the American people." And I'm like, yeah, so both sides are going to say that, right? Like, both sides are going to say that, and they're both going to be like, hey, here you go. Like, I have an image. Is blockchain voting the answer to our election woes? It's like, just give it time. Once we all have our digital identity, then that'll be up next. So look, here I have the Mormon transhumanist video. I was talking a little bit about, like, the metaverse and time and ubiquitous computing. And again, I will just reiterate my frustration with the fact that if we continue to talk about money and hedge funds and Wall Street, but we don't link it to the tokenization of our interactions in a panopticon, and start to reset how we understand money and how it's going to be used moving forward, we're going to never catch up to where we need to be. So understanding the metaverse as a mesh, right, that we're navigating this mesh. I mean, who imagined that the World Wide Web was really going to totally be a web, like a 3-dimensional web? That's what the smart contract layer is going to be. And I didn't realize that Tim Berners-Lee, when he set up the World Wide Web Consortium, which is really becoming, Web3 at this point, that was 1994, and he had left CERN. So he came out of CERN, and then he moved in to set up the World Wide Web Consortium in 94. So that's a long time. So if we're thinking about the backstory, I have this is an interesting slide deck about the World Wide Web Consortium, and it talks about ubiquitous computing, that they were envisioning it in 91. 91 was also when Scott Stornetta, who we saw at the Mormon Transhumanist Conference, he and his colleague, Stuart Haber, were the first ones to develop a time-stamped digital document, which was this distributed ledger. And I think that's really important, because what's coming is a quote-unquote reality that is synthetic, that you can literally speed up and slow down and maybe rewind. And so the time stamping is the only way of making an anchor into some sort of firm reality. like that. And that was something that they did in 1991, right? Like at this point, I'm not so interested in Satoshi Nakamoto and crypto money as people want to talk about trading it in digital wallets. I'm far more interested in the web, ubiquitous computing, reality management, story management, time stamping documents, which are really going to be files, right? I think these were going to be files of scenes, files of people, files of experiences that, depending on your tokens, you will be restricted from, or you will be able to access. But the timing element, I think there is stuff going on with time. And Cesium, which is the open metaverse company, when Jason and I went out to Boulder and we went to the NIST atomic clock in Boulder, like it runs on this sort of radio frequency thing from the cesium molecule. So clearly the time piece is important. And the fact that, again, Stornada's there at the Mormon Transhumanist Conference, this is 2022, like this is 30 years later, right? Like he's seen the whole art, making his timestamp document to showing up, and I shoved a copy of our brochure in his, little hands and his wife's hands. And, he's standing there in this red, Mr. Rogers sweater. And like, he didn't seem super happy to see me, but I think there's this presumption that the people who built this are somehow larger than life or this certain thing. And I'm like, not really. They're not really, actually. They're just people. Like they could live down the block from you. And that's why we all have to be responsible for seeing it, because they're not really larger than life. They're just regular people who somehow ended up in a position of being part of this unfolding of this dehumanized, profane program.
They answer the call. I mean, you and I have talked about the network, and think of it as being more horizontal. And they just answer the call. It's whatever that, it's like a siren, it's luring them. And I believe that they just, they're willing to do those things that will build this system.
Well, and I'm sure they know what buttons to push to tell the story, right? And this was in 91, before cloud-based computing. I mean, imagine the way they'll be able to weave a story to bring in the people moving forward, because they'll have all that data. I mean, that's the hard thing in being in this space and not knowing what's real and what's not real and what's authentic and what's not authentic, is like they know how to push your buttons. And yet, at the same time, I don't think we can live in a space where we just harden up and we turn into machines, because that's their goal to begin with. So like being really centered, like in yourself, and as we all navigate this, it's going to be really important. And knowing your values and holding to those values and being able to tease through stories that are told to you when maybe in your gut that it's not the full story, it's not the right story. Like trust yourself, cultivate that instinct. So this is from the speech. I believe America is at an inflection point, one of those moments that determine the shape of everything that's to come after, right? Inflection point. And now America must choose to move forward or backwards, to build a future or obsess about the past, to be a nation of hope and unity, again, unity gaming, or an optimism, or a nation of fear, division, and darkness. And so when I read that, to me, the looking forward, looking backwards, that's like a Janus symbolism. That's a Janus refuge. And that's the Roman god, Janus, of like January, that looks both forward and back in a set of transitions and gateways. And so I'm going to move on. But the second piece I pulled here, it's a bit about magenta. He says, these are hard things, but I am an American president, not a president of red America or blue America, but of all America. And again, Steffers has been working a lot on the magenta theme and this idea that it's outside of the normal color spectrum that's between red and blue, and that like the strong use of color as the backdrop against the brick, the red and the blue. And I think, Jason, I don't think we have this clip, but at some point there was some color correction that happened on one of the feeds that turned more magenta. But I feel like magenta is a placeholder space to sort of insert programming, like sort of subliminal programming that relates to the Web3 agenda.
So yeah, this is the original this is the C-SPAN image right here that I grabbed, but it was, so what I noticed on this, and actually oh, this is my color graded one. Let me find. Um, I actually like. Let me see. Let me go to this one. Boom. Let's see. This one is, yeah, this is the CNN. So this was, so if you look at his face, it was, there was kind of a green tint on his face. And then like partway through, they like, I don't know if they, you know, someone was like, oh, we wanted to do a color correction or whatever. But like about halfway through, it switches to this. I don't know if you can see the difference there, but like,
Yeah, it is more pink.
so if I could do, I could do these, boom, I'm gonna just do a full screen. So like his face is kind of green in this one, and then like that you can see there, it changed, and so
Yeah,
you were pointing out that the background became a little bit more purple. But the thing I noticed right off the beginning is, you know, I do color grading, and so I was like, oh, his skin tone is off. There's a green tint to his skin. So that's why I was like, oh, let me fix that. And I guess I didn't load the right one, but I went and fixed it just to see what would happen. But anyway, so yeah, there was that.
Well, and green is also a significant color, like I mean, it sort of that, so that like the sage green, I think, is the opposite to the magenta. So like the you know, and of course green is a highly charged word and concept now with the ESG investing and the sustainability.
When I was just like, these are supposed, I mean, I imagine they have like high-end professionals doing this production, because I do video production, and there's no way I would have allowed that bad green tint on the, you know, I would have done some color grading.
The president.
On the president, you know, so it's like, did someone just like screw up, or was that intentional, or what? It was kind of strange. But then they, like I said, it was only CNN. The C-SPAN, the green's there the whole time. But on the CNN, halfway through it was like somebody did adjusted the color.
I
but
just can't do that anymore.
Yeah, but the way they did it in the back, it changed the background too. There's actually a way you can fix the skin while still leaving the background the same. So anyway, that was just a little technical thing, because that's what I deal with all the time. But it was interesting.
Well, this slide is just Cesium. This is the Cesium building on 11th Street. And again, just, you know, not far at all from Independence Hall. And it's interesting to me, again, with the magenta, is if you get that image, and part of what they sell is this idea that you can like knit together, like even something as basic as a bunch of photos on your phone into almost like a gaming environment quickly. And they use it for all sorts of modeling, military modeling, game spaces, advertising. They do it all. And I know, Jason, you had been listening for a while to a lot of their podcasts on creating the open metaverse. So this press release here was from early August, where they were talking about SIGGRAPH, which I'm not sure, I'm assuming it's a conference that was in Vancouver, that they were going to be hosting a 2-day event about the open metaverse on collaboration, interoperability, and including having experts, including Neil Stevenson, who coined the term metaverse in Snow Crash, as well as people from NVIDIA, Pixar, Roblox, AWS, Amazon Web Services, Adobe, and Unity. And so this is really big. This is a big organization. They're bringing in big players. The idea is that it's all open, open source. They're going to be building this smart contract layer. But it's funny when you look at the image that this is from their website. It's kind of hard to tell. It almost looks like it might be in a game. Like it's hard. It's like, is that a real photo? Has it been cleaned? Because in the image, there's sort of a flat sky that looks just like a midday sort of overcast sky. But in the windows, 3 of the windows or 4 of the windows, there's a decided magenta cast in the windows. And it's not as if it's a sunset and it's reflecting a sunset or something. It actually doesn't make sense in the context of the building. So, that's part of that.
It's on
plus
both
what
sides
you were saying
as well.
about the green and the magenta.
There's some of that magenta even on this side.
Yeah, like these
as
things
well.
can just be manipulated.
Yeah.
Well, look at if you outline that
And you don't
building,
know how.
it's a cube.
Oh, yeah, or block. Yeah.
It's a block, and so you could outline it in a full hexagon.
Yeah, no, I see that. That's interesting. Yeah. I do see that.
Well, the 3 windows down
so
below
that's-
actually, I'll bring it up full screen, but like the 3 windows down below also have like let me bring it full size. Boom. The on the corner there's 3 windows that have like the same image over them. Like there's an identical, I can't quite tell, but
Yeah.
there's
I mean, I
definitely
don't know if that's a billboard. Again, there's something about the quality of the image that makes you wonder, like, is this a simulation? Like, did they gamify their building, or is it a real photo? Like, how much of a real photo is it? I mean, and that's the question. Like, we had some of these concerns in Ukraine. Like, what is the real photo? Like no filter, right? Like, like, at what point do you get to bend reality, right, with imaging? And knowing what the agenda is behind the way in which you're bending the reality in the digital space. And that, again, you were saying in the video of the speech that CNN changed, but the other ones didn't. So, like, depending on what station you were seeing, your experience was different, right? So you could be seeing mostly the same thing, but not quite. And imagine all the different ways that they can mess around with reality. And they've already talked about deep fakes. I mean, the deep fake conversation was something we were having 5 years ago. Now nobody even talks about deep fakes anymore. Isn't that interesting? Like, somehow we've just forgotten that deep fakes exist. We're supposed to forget. So this is just a link to Sephir's post about magenta, and it's very interesting. It's very highly documented, but I couldn't help but see all of the, these were like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There were at least 8 MAGA Republicans, because to me, I see MAGA and I see magenta, like it sort of shortens to magenta, because why would you glom people? Like, there's only MAGA Republicans except for a few. Like, I think there was a couple people he said weren't actually MAGA, but most people were MAGA. And that's a label, but to me, it's this imprinting of MAG, which I was looking up MAG as the etymology, and it's actually, because I was wondering if it was like magus or magician, and that's different. That's like a Persian word, but MAG is like to knead or to fit, like to knead like dough or to make fit, which is also kind of an interesting concept. So I don't know. Did I lose you guys?
No, we're here. We're here. I just lowered your resolution just because it was chopping up.
I know. Sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, I know. It's not great. Okay, so this is the Noguchi sculpture. Just back to Janus, you can see the lightning. This wasn't built until the 80s. And it's interesting because Wilson Good was the mayor that cut the ribbon on this sculpture. And he was also the mayor that dropped the bomb on Move, the city's first Black mayor, and dropped the bomb on the Move. So talk about like energetics, right? And it's just opposite the Constitution Center, which is at the end of Independence Mall. But I'm going to read this about Janus and what it means, and keep this in mind with respect to the key, and if that pyramid underneath sort of evokes Ethereum or the metaverse that's below the lightning bolt. Janus was known as the initiator of human life. Okay, so that's the whole world sensorium. Transformations between stages of life, again, transitions, and shifts from one historical era to another. According to Roman mythology, Janus was present at the beginning of the world. As the god of gates, Janus guarded the gates of heaven and held access to heaven and other gods. What is unusual about the god Janus is his iconic image, a god of transitions and dualities. So duality is, again, sort of the twinning. He is portrayed with 2 faces, one facing the past and one facing the future. He also holds a key in his right hand, which symbolizes his protection of doors, gates, thresholds, and other separations or openings between spatial boundaries. And I think, like, the geospatial, the metaverse, is all about the geospatial stuff. I mean, and that's what the Cold War was about, was about creating the capacity to manage the Earth from space, to spy on us from space in really, really intimate detail, the amount of spying that could happen from space on us. And then the key, again, if that's your digital identity, or maybe that's your token, your access, your ability to cross the gate in the smart contract, that is part of it. And I think that's really interesting. I mean, again, I felt that this sculpture is actually really, really important, and Franklin's involvement in electricity and everything else.
Just found an image for Janus.
And clearly that's part of the speech, is that we have a choice. There's backwards or forwards. There's, light or dark. So
we must choose.
I don't know.
Choose now.
We must choose. And this is a bit of an oddball, but Lynn, I don't know, you might know this better than me. So I'm just putting this out there so someone else knows this. At the American Philosophical Society, again, which is next door to Independence Hall and the center of all of the scientific equipment, I often talk about Kelpius and the monks of the Wissahickon, and that these 40 monks came from Germany, and they were metaphysical, and they had met with Jane Lead, who was this Gnostic sort of Sophionic person who also was connected to the Quakers a bit when they were in London. And then they came over and they lived in the woods in Germantown in a cave, and they were alchemists and astrologers and astronomers, and they sang choral songs. And they were about like the alchemy of the soul. The first hymnal in the New World was one of theirs. And the first oil portrait in the New World was of Kelpius, Jakob Kelp. I can't remember Kelpius's first name. But they were quirky people, but they were astrologers, and they were very much into the science of, like, people would ask them when they built, like, set the foundation stone of Old Swedes Church in the late 1600s, they asked the monks to come out and pick the date. So this was a science. And so this thing here is the Orologium of Achaz, which is at the Philosophical Society. And evidently it is missing some parts. But it was probably from Jakob Zimmermann in Germany, and came from like a German guy who made this very fancy metalwork in Germany. And it's a sundial, but you put water in it. And so what it is the miracle of the 38th chapter of Isaiah. So I don't like have all this committed to memory, but essentially this miracle, like, God said to Hezekiah, like, yeah, you're get ready to die because your time is up. And Hezekiah was like, but I did everything right. Like, I did all your stuff. And then it was like, well, now that I think about it, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll give you 15 more years. And then I'll protect your city too. And this will be a sign that I'm a powerful God because I've saved your life and I've saved the city. And it had to do with the fact that the sundial was turned back 10 degrees. And so this whole water, it's a sundial, but with water in it, which is fascinating. And this is what's said of it is that this semicircular shell explains the miracle of the 38th chapter of Isaiah. For if you fill a basin altogether with water, the shadow of the sun is borne backward by 10 degrees. Moreover, it indicates any common hour of the day whatsoever together with that of the planets, which they call hours. So to me, that's really like this artifact, right? This artifact is still in the American Philosophical Society, where they're doing the sharp, hidden story portal. Right? And they've literally got like a time machine over there. Right? They don't know how to use it, or they're missing some parts supposedly. But they've got this stuff tucked away, and it's this like early scientific stuff that relates to time. And again, manipulation, Janus, simulations. I feel like, and it's embedded within like biblical scripture too. So I think it's very interesting. And I just want somebody else to know about it. This is just some more context for the time in the Janus question. So they're building it, right? So Carpenter's Hall is the next bit down from the Philosophical Society. I don't think it's straight up Freemasons, but it's definitely got the thing going on around the builders and the London building trades. And so these were the people who came over with Penn to build the new building. So I think we have to understand the metaverse, the construction of the open metaverse within the context of empire and the builders and the people who were in charge, because this building, the Carpenters Company, Carpenters Hall, was where the first Continental Congress met. So when they were first having issues with Britain and they were trying to figure out what to do, the first time they didn't go to Independence Hall, they hid out in Carpenters Hall because it was more tucked away. These were all world builders. And, that's the name of Steffer's series, is the World Builders series. So they were building, and it's a beautiful building with the masonry and the woodwork, but they were doing fine craft, and they came out of the London tradition, and many of them were Quakers. So I'm going to move on to Quakers next. I think.
Real quick, too. Lynn, did you want to say something about this image?
Oh, yeah. That was the kite, the reference to the kite before. So there was a merger between AIEE, which is the American Institute of Electrical Engineers, and IRE. And then, so I guess it's all now the IEEE, which was started in 1884. But Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison founded the American Institute of Electrical Engineers. But their logos have morphed into these kites. Starting.
Oh, okay.
They call it the kite.
Little,
but I just
in the gray area.
The middle one. I just sent you that one because that had all of them on there, but the more recent one is on the right there. And the anyway, that's it.
Well, I'm planning on going up on next Wednesday, because I think this merge thing is counting up the blocks, and I think it's maybe going to be on the 15th of September, but it's dynamic. But I think I'm going to go up on the 14th, and maybe like there's some hikes around. There's a swamp nearby, and then there's a little mountain nearby, and then there's some Quaker meetings. So I'm going to go see what I can find and put together at Bell Labs. But that's where Scott Stornetta, developed his timestamp machine. Was at Bell Labs in New Jersey. So Alexander Graham Bell Labs, they're central to all of this. So again, this is just talking about that the carpenters, the builders, were connected to the Quakers. And I do think that the Quakers through Penn are very instrumental in blockchain and building out the metaverse. And so I thought this was quite a quote here. I made a bet on you, the American people, and that bet is paying off. Like, this is the Biden quote. I made a bet on you. And I'm like, I'm sure you did. Like, this all is one grand bet. Like, this is a big bet in the CIA's video game. And so I have two images. One is from Social Finance, which is super magenta. And, they're pitching the Biden administration on outcomes-based approaches for an equitable recovery. They've got a memo to Biden and Harris that was from 2021, last January. A year in, we could recover as long as we have outcomes-based contracts and lots of data and lots of magenta. And then next to it, I have an image that I use often, but it's so perfect. It's from the Wall Street Journal. Yeah.
Lynn has to go babysit.
Oh, sorry.
So did we lose her?
I think so.
We may have lost her. We didn't get to say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Lynn.
Bye, Lynn. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I'll switch this up here. Go, carry on. I'll adjust this.
Yeah. So I was just going to say this article is gold. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's Christopher Riccardi. He's the grandfather of collateralized debt obligations. At least that's what Wall Street Journal calls him. And he's like, he wants to do what for higher education, what he did for mortgages was essentially bring down the global economy. And so these career impact bonds, which are going to reskill everyone on the lifelong ledger, that's what's coming, and that's what social finance is about, and that's what these income sharing agreements on blockchain are about. And they're setting everyone up literally for debt slavery, and they're framing it as progressive and social justice and equity, and nothing could be farther from the truth. And it's just devastating to me that we continue to allow these jokers. And I'm not just like, it could be whoever is delivering those lines. Whoever is the archetype of the president at the moment. It's not political, really. It's whoever is put up in front to say this. They're not telling you the whole story. They're not telling you that they're about to turn toddlers into toxic debt products and bet on their performance on a surveillance play table. But that's what's coming. And we want to pretend like we're defending democracy, even as we know that this structure is being built out right underneath us. It's a scam. It makes me mad.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. So, and part of this, because I feel like I want to spend, dig into the Quakers some, and as like a Philadelphian and an alumna of the University of Pennsylvania, like fighting Quakers, we need to know what this is, right? The Quakers were, as much as they framed themselves as the good people, the major English banking families were Quaker. And so, yeah, maybe they weren't selling slaves on the block, but they were trading paper that backed slaves. And then even William Penn had his own slaves in Pennsylvania. So I think this is really important when we're looking at social impact finance and the way in which cyber-physical systems and so-called tokenized democracy are going to feed the new slavery narrative that we're supposed to embrace as like a wonderful ascension existence as people of the light. And as we move into the light a bit more, the photonics and the optics, George Fox, who was the founder of Quakerism, he that was part of it, that everyone had the divine spark of light, of a divine spark of light in them. And the light was really central. But I feel like that the light is actually part of this photonic discussion. And this is just talking about Barclays Bank being Quaker and the fact that William Penn had slaves. So we inhabit stories. We inhabit stories of sort of liberal progressivism, that the Quakers were all wonderful and fair and everything, but we're not looking at the complexity, because there's other, I mean, the Quakers weren't all terrible either, but it's not cut and dry. And unless we're willing to actually look and understand the myths of goodness, and how this goodness gets masked in like that financial shenanigans have been going on for hundreds of years, and the people that we might, at least progressives, uplift as the good people, like, we don't really know the whole story. And once you know the whole story, the whole thing gets a lot murkier. So this is a book I've been spending a lot of time on. It's called Quakernomics and Ethical Capitalism. And this guy, Mike King, is pretty much an apologist for the Quakers. Like, I think, he would be saying like that we're going to have good capitalism. It's maybe this, he would probably back the stakeholder capitalism plan. And I was really surprised in reading through this section about a banking family, the Gurney family, because the Gurney family lived in a house called Earlham Hall in Norwich. And the people of this Gurney family was very large. A lot of them were sort of social reformers. And one of them was involved in the creation of Earlham College, which is where Julius Stolman's papers ended up. And so, like, where sort of a high level, very rich and connected New York Zionist papers end up in a small Indiana Quaker school, that's weird. And I finally tracked it back to the fact that the people behind this college were Quakers, very influential, and that the school was connected to an international arbitration legal program that I believe started in the 1890s with the support of Andrew Carnegie under peace, but is going to lead to a smart contract global code of Hammurabi with some religious doctrine thrown in for good measure that's going to throw us into the moonshot metaverse cyber life. And so the Gurneys were important to me because they essentially did the biggest banking scam up until 2008. And they tried to do a run on the Bank of England. And, even Karl Marx said that he was amused by the Gurneys' gall that they would do a run on the Bank of England. And while essentially it destroyed their firm and brought down many, many other businesses, ultimately they did reforms that strengthened the Bank of England. So it didn't accomplish what they wanted, unless what they wanted was to uphold the Bank of England in what was coming. And this is in the I'm trying to remember if this is the early 19th century. But the Gurney family was all part of this. And then I later come to find out that in the 70s, the first climate research center that was rolling this all out in 1972 as we approach limits to growth in the cybernetic program, literally as at the University of East Anglia, which is where the Earlham Hall is. The Gurney family estate, although I think they rented it, which is interesting, they didn't own it, but literally the home base of the Gurney family that tried to do a run on the Bank of England and crash the entire economy in their banking, like dirty financial deals. Their home is now incorporated as a building on this campus of the University of East Anglia that became the home of the very first climate research institute that was being funded by Royal Dutch Shell, British Petroleum, and the Wolfson family, like the big oil. Like literally the big oil was funding the Climate Research Center in 1972, and where that went. And ironically, at the time, they were predicting a new ice age. That was the narrative at the time, that the ice age was coming, not that we were going to all burn up. But to me, teasing apart the reality of the Quaker myth is really important. And I feel like Biden being here wasn't just about Independence Hall and America, but really it was about the Quakers and the power of William Penn and the power that's coming with his augmented democracy, which is going to be aligned with sociocracy and like Quaker-based consensus.
And your videos keeps freezing, but we're getting the audio, so all's good.
I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
guess it's just.
It's
Well, if
like
we
we're
get
getting
the
the
audio,
audio.
then
So.
at least we can overlay the we
Yeah.
can overlay the slides. Yeah, so this is from Biden. I believe we can build a better America. So we passed the biggest infrastructure investment since President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And we've now embarked on a decade of rebuilding the nation's roads, bridges, highways, ports, water systems, high-speed internet, and railroads. And so that's from the speech. Again, he's channeling Eisenhower. The irony is that, like, the whole Green New Deal contingent of the progressive side of things is literally ostensibly trying to fix what Eisenhower set up with the interstate highways and the free mortgages and the suburban sprawl and the spread. Like, the stuff that they're saying they're doing with smart cities is in a direct response to Eisenhower. And plus, Eisenhower was the one who set up DARPA. So I have an image here with Eisenhower and Nixon, and it's from the DARPA Facebook page. I mean, it's kind of ironic that really, I guess, that DARPA has its own Facebook page. But it says, in the State of the Union address on January 9th, 1958, Eisenhower, in the defense reorganization segment of the address, for the first time publicly alluded to the organization within the Department of Defense that would be established a month later as the Advanced Research Projects Agency. And so there we go. Like, there's our web, right? Like, Eisenhower got the web started, but Biden is not being, like, again, he's saying high-speed internet, but nobody really most people would not understand what that actually means. And then the next quote is, "We're going to end cancer as we know it, mark my words, and we're going to create millions of jobs and a clean energy economy." And so this speaks to the article that I wrote about PEN and alternative energy and next-gen nuclear and the creation of radioisotopes from these thorium reactors. So he's got in one sentence wrapped up like, hey, we could do like human plus clean energy and jobs. Like, in our new jobs, we'll just to be think things so the AI can mine our brains for our emotions and our biometric data, because we'll all be glowing from the isotopes tapped off of the nuclear stuff. So.
Well, it's a funny way to say it too. We're going to end cancer as we know it.
Yeah.
As we know it, like it's going to be different. Okay, it's going to be a new kind of cancer.
Yeah, we're gonna and then you actually you might have to pay for your upgrades. It's a subscription model of cancer.
Yeah.
And so this is just about like talking. I believe we could go from being the highest cost of prescriptions in the world to making prescription drugs and healthcare more affordable. So we passed the most significant healthcare reform since President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act. And the reality is that Delaware was a leader starting in 2017 in blockchain health records. And I think right now, like there's some challenge right now in Delaware with getting up to speed on blockchain because all of the corporations want to be in Delaware for this because they're all incorporated. And now with the crypto and the metaverse coming, there's jockeying, right? Like Wyoming, there are new places that might try to outcompete Delaware to be the place everyone wants to incorporate because the legal structure is conducive to blockchain-based business. But it is important when he's saying healthcare reform that people realize that this is about blockchain health records and blockchain prescriptions and possibly blockchain compliant protocol with Internet of Things wearables and Internet of Things pill caps and everything Internet of Things for your biological digital twin. And so this is one about the light. Just going back again, I made a bet on you, American people, and that bet is paying off, proving that from darkness, the darkness of Charlottesville, of COVID, of gun violence, of insurrection, we can see the light. Light is now visible. Light that will guide us forward, not only in words, but in actions. Actions for you, for your children, for your grandchildren, for America. And the optics are really central, the photonics, because the next gen communication is photonics. Like, why doesn't Biden, instead of saying like internet, right, or high-speed internet, tell us that it's photonics so that we actually start to have the words to know what you're talking about? I have an image, a screenshot from 2015, actually. Here it's Biden and Cuomo are hooked on photonics. I guess that's supposed to be a play on hooked on phonics. But Biden and Cuomo, because Cuomo is, sitting there with Eric Schmidt and they're going to remake New York, right, for photonics to essentially embed us in light, the children of the light, which is the Quakers. And next to it, I have a screenshot, and this isn't Biden specific, but it's from an entity in Austria that's talking about a curriculum for optics and photonics for children in times of COVID-19 crisis. Because there's nothing that children in crisis need than a solid photonics curriculum for ages 8 to 10, right? And so clearly they're getting the next generation. The next generation is being onboarded into this reality so that they don't know anything outside of the metaverse prison planet. This is from a screenshot from my my Little Sis map that got deleted, but I still do have a Wayback Machine version. I have a close-up and then a zooming out. But this was actually, for context, the timing. In 1997, there was a summit for America's future that was looking at both volunteerism and children. And from that gathering, which was put in place by Harris Wofford, who was our senator, a Democrat, at the behest of George Romney, Mitt Romney's dad, on his deathbed. On his deathbed, George Romney asked for someone to make a youth summit on Independence Mall, right? I mean, that's kind of a crazy thing, although we know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is really central in all of the biodigital convergence, right? And so Harris Wofford, a Democrat, set it up. He got all the living presidents there, Carter, the Bushes, Clinton. They all showed up, I think. And from this, Colin Powell was the host. And then out of that came America's Promise. And it was all about, and I think you might have mentioned it, volunteerism, volunteering. It was centered around 1,000 Points of Light. They were a major partner. And this volunteerism summit in 1997, like fast forward 25 years, right? Or not more than 25 years, 35 years? Fast forward to now, right? Like we're looking at automation and UBI and everyone being dispossessed. And so they're going to need to make people volunteer for the new thing that's coming. They're going to need the volunteers, and they're going to need to track them and trace them and tokenize them and turn that into an impact market. So it's amazing to look way back to that timing and realize that they knew, like the reason that I put in the Stornetta dates and the Tim Berners-Lee and the World Wide Web dates, the 91 and the 94, was this is 97. So they knew it was coming. All the presidents standing on Independence Mall in 1997 who were uplifting ed tech and the broadband plan and E-rate and getting everybody connected in schools knew that the plan was to create a web and a decentralized ledger system that would essentially dispossess us of our entire right to be material beings. And they get up and they put on T-shirts and they act like they're good volunteering people. And to me, it's just shocking to see how far back it goes. But they had to have known. Like all of those people in that inner circle had to have known. And the Social Innovation Fund was a partner in this, and 1,000 Points of Light. So the light is, I think it is the photonics. And here's the larger map. So I included this so you can see how America's Promise moves into Ready Nation, which is the workforce development tied to Jim Heckman and the skills badging that will lead to the children being put on surveillance play tables for impact finance. And then at the bottom part of the map is all of the partners, the Boys and Girls Clubs, right? The Comcast, the United Ways, the gaming companies, the people who are going to train the children to live in the metaverse and to build it and to defend it. So just getting back to the merge, and I'm getting close to being done. Yeah,
well, I was going to just real quick mention one thing here, like the points of, I was kind of looking into the Points of Light Foundation, and they just had another youth summit last July. I think it was in July. Anyways, yeah, this is their youth. They just had a youth summit. So I was kind of looking at their thing, and they were also kind of in that they were promoting national service as well, like a volunteer as like, that idea has been floated around,
Yeah.
You have a mandatory national service.
Because they're going to take away everybody's right to have a stable job. And this is an image that Leo brought my attention to. It says Consensus with, I guess, Lubin's the head of that. Like they're launching the first green NFTs on the main net. And it's as the merge approaches. They're talking about the merge. They have an image there of some sort of smart landscape and it's very interesting because it's green, but it looks very bizarre. Literally, it's like drones with hanging philodendrons off of them, as if like having police drones with houseplants hanging off the side is supposed to make us feel better about being in the panopticon. And they're saying that these NFTs, I'll just read this. This is from this September 1st, so this is fairly recent. As the merge approaches, Ethereum evolved that the shift to proof of stake, the live and seamless network upgrade to proof of stake will reduce Ethereum's carbon footprint by 99.95% and increase security and set the foundation to unlock massive future scale opportunity. Consensus is inviting the world to participate in one of the first sustainable NFT drops on the Ethereum mainnet. And so, again, this is the context. I mean, if you listen to that speech, there was nothing that would prepare people for what is coming, right? And this is actually a quote from the speech. He says, "But I see a different America, an America with an unlimited future, an America that's about to take off." And so he knows what the about to take off part means, but he's not going to tell you. And in this image of the smart landscape, it actually is sort of like loops, almost like a roller coaster. Like when you go to a really steep roller coaster and you hit the bottom and you start clicking up, or like a reel of film, and it's green and it lifts up. So it does have this feeling of being about to take off, but in an unsettling way, because like nobody wants to live vertically on this, hanging off the side of some smart green infrastructure with philodendron drones swarming around you. But that's what this looks like. That's what they're trying to sell us on. And the other thing is, you can see there are sort of buttresses of organic shapes, these curvy shapes, which to me feels a lot like 3D printing. And these Voronoi patterns are going to be working with 3D printers and creating whole new systems of the built environment based on biomimicry. But really it is like mining the molecular systems of life on planet Earth to create these weird new synthetic prototypes, which just feels really gross. It's just a different kind of mining.
Well, I'm trying to find this image here, but like, I don't know if there's a movie called Elysium. It's and the other, there's like it's like a space station where the rich people live on it, but it looks similar to that, like that curvature, like it goes up, like this is a space station, but if you go on the inside of it, there's like, plants, and, there's like actual like people living on it. I was trying to find a good image. I can't quite find an image of where they're actually on the planet here, but anyways, it's interesting because it's like he's like part like cyborg as well, and also like in terms of imprinting and stuff, I noticed that a lot of movies that this actor is in, I can't think of his name now, Matt Damon. He's in a lot of movies that have a lot of like imprinting. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Little side
Yeah.
thing.
No, I mean, they're selling us on this really hard, and they're making it green, but I don't think like that green. I don't think you know what it actually means. It's not what you think it means. Okay, so from the speech, Biden says, "I believe we could lift America from the depths of COVID, so I passed the largest economic recovery package since Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and today America's economy is faster and stronger than any advanced nation in the world." And then I have an image next to it that's a bit old, from like 2015, I think, or 16. Actually, I can't see. My eyes are too old. Oh. But it has Markey and Ocasio-Cortez and Biden, and they're talking about like or maybe it's not Biden, Ocasio-Cortez at least, and Markey, about how FDR's New Deal laid the groundwork for the Green New Deal in good ways and bad. And I forgot to include a slide of this, but like, again, what story do you inhabit? We're trained to inhabit a story of FDR as like the benevolent, caring for the people in the Depression. And then, the people who know more about the Federal Reserve systems and know about preserving capital and what the New Deal, the limitations of that, realize that that's not quite true. But then if you also look at Bretton Woods, because, Roosevelt, that was a key part, and getting the UN set up, even though Truman brought that to the finish line, like the Bretton Woods Agreement and the IMF and the cybernetic control grid is coming through the currency. And even as much as I say, like, we shouldn't just talk about it as money, the governance mechanism, the flow of currency is access, and the structural the debt finance system and the structural adjustment system that came with the IMF and the World Bank were really central. And again, as Raul wrote in his piece about Nigeria, that piece had to happen first. Like the control grid of both the space control grid and the financial control grid had to extend like throughout the global South. And they had to sort of be acclimated and inculcated into the global aid and humanitarian system. And that's something that Leo has talked a lot about with what's coming with Cello and the beautiful money, right? So what's coming next, right, with the Green New Deal, that's going to be the Bretton Woods 2. And that's what New America was pushing. That's what Tamika Tilleman was pushing, you know, who was also working with Andreessen Horowitz, right? Bretton Woods 2 is going to be the green version, which will be further enmeshing us into this cybernetic construct of money. But at this point, the money will be behavioral currency and energetic currency, not just dollars in any way that we understand it now.
Yeah, money as we know it is going to be radically different. And that image, by the way, was February of 2019. Just
okay, so it's more great. Okay, thank you. So this. I'm kind of in the home stretch here. So this is talking about the merge, and it's the intersection of the proof of work mainnet with the proof of stake beacon chain. And I think it is interesting that it's called the beacon chain because beacon does appear at least twice in the speech that Biden gave. He says, they are how we became the greatest nation on earth. They are why for more than 2 centuries, America has been a beacon to the world. And that we proved that for all its imperfections, America is still the beacon to the world, an ideal to be realized, a promise to be kept. So I think that there is an imprinting happening around optics and light and beacons moving forward in that around this merge. I think that there's a lot of energetics. It feels like that speech needed to be made in Philadelphia in advance of the merge happening. And he also mentioned flames. So we've got lights, we've got beacons, we've got flames. We, the people, have burning inside of each of us a flame of liberty that was lit there at Independence Hall, a flame that is our way, that lit our way through abolition, the Civil War, suffrage, depression, world wars, civil rights. That sacred flame still burns. And so again, these are all civil rights programs. This is all very much liberal progressivism. And it's interesting to me. So this is not close to where Independence Hall is. It's on the other side of Center City. But one of the first Unitarian societies was in North America was in Philadelphia in 1796. And I didn't realize, but Joseph Priestley, who was the chemist who discovered oxygen, he was being persecuted in England and he fled to Pennsylvania. Now, I think he went up on the Susquehanna, but he was mentoring groups of Unitarians, and these were the scientists. These were the science religion people. And I think it's the science religion people who are going to be really key in the push for the global ecumenicalist world parliament, whether it's Unitarians, whether it's Baha'i, whether it's liberal Judaism. Like it's going to be the rational, right, as opposed to the mystical that they need to hew to. They need to contain the spirituality away from a direct mystical connection into the scientific secular human rationalism. So we have one of the first Unitarian churches, although, and I didn't realize Frank Furness, the acclaimed architect of Philadelphia, Victorian architect, that his father was one of these early Unitarian ministers. But the flaming chalice is their symbol. Now it's Unitarian Universalist. And even Harvard has ties to Unitarianism. Tufts, which is a really big player, Omidyar is a graduate of Tufts and has given them a lot of money, and they're very big in robotics and AI and literacy. So Unitarian Universalist is this double circle, which is one for Unitarian, one for Universalist, and then this universal flame. And it's depicted in many different ways, but if you do a Google search online, they're all very embedded with rainbows. So you've got this double cybernetic circle with burning things, optics, light, flame, and lots of rainbows attached. And this is just an image that, again, the humanist Unitarian Universalist. So these are the secular humanists. These are the ones that want the scientists in charge. And no surprise, like their cover image there is a group of children weirdly wearing a SpongeBob hat, one of them, having a "We Are All Connected," sort of clearly a climate gathering there. So that is we're reasonable. We trust the science. We're all connected. And that reminds me of that Ali Isom thing at Mormon Transhumanist, right? We are wired to connect. We are wired to connect. wait, the embryology, the social embryology is finally catching up. So this is just a map. If you guys want to look at it later, it talks. This is the map that I made of Yogananda when he came. He developed this self-realization fellowship in Los Angeles, and he was very connected to Luther Burbank and plant hybridization and Kodak, and like have a sense that these meditation centers, not all of meditation, but Yogananda in particular, the guy who's now the president of that group, he's like the child of a high level, like Navy admiral, or something like that. Like it feels very, very controlled, like that history. But the person who brought him he came for the 7th Congress of Unitarian Liberals in 1920 in Boston. And then he ended up hooking up with a Rosicrucian dentist. And then within like 10 years, he was on the circuit filling halls with thousands of people telling them how to manifest money and love and good health. And then doing his meditative practice in Los Angeles in the company of a family of former members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who converted on his way through Salt Lake City and became leaders in his operation. So there's a lot of interesting stuff between the Unitarians and these larger ecumenical movements and looking again at these power players, Harvard, Tufts, Priestley, going back to, again, the empire, the science, the rationalists, and the Anglican dissidents in England. I'm getting close. 4 more slides. This is sociocracy. I think, so Quaker consensus, this is the whole thing. They're working on this idea of peaceful, right? Homeostasis, governance, steady state. We're all chill, right? We've got executive function and we've disconnected from the outcomes, and we're just steady, man, in the metaverse. Like we're floating in the metaverse and we're all cool with our sharing our tokens back and forth so the AI can figure us out. And what's coming up now is this idea of sociocracy that actually emerged in World War II by some Quakers, the Cadburys of the chocolates, who ended up leaving England and going to the Netherlands and becoming peace activists and instituting this way of doing collective decision making. And looking back again on all of the Occupy stuff and some of this collective decision making processing, like the very process heavy, I think it was feeding into the AI. I think this was all getting ready to move into the tokenization. So sociocracy was started at Cornelius Bucke and his wife, Beatrice or Betty Cadbury in the Netherlands. And then it was uplifted by this guy who they created a boarding school. And this young man at the boarding school later became a consultant at Royal Dutch Shell. And he started to embed this sociocracy, this consensus-based decision-making and organizational structure in a lot of major corporations in the Netherlands. And then it came back over here maybe 10 or 20 years ago, and now we see it coming up. And it's this idea, again, of like, I don't know, nonviolent communication or trading choices or coming to some decision that is more in alignment with the Quaker mentality. There's something called Sociocracy for All. One of the major deployments is a children's congress in India. So that's interesting because the Indian children are huge targets of impact finance. And I have a tweet here from last 2020, February of 2020. Interesting, February, right before all this stuff happened. It says decentralized technology like blockchain is becoming the foundation of our digital world, and sociocracy is the perfect complement. We can foster decentralized decision-making and creating a world where every voice is heard. And I think the whole independence thing is this idea that you can be your own independent agent, your own self-sovereign independent commodity that works across realms, from the Democrats to the libertarians, right? Like, and they, the tweet itself said, decentralized systems are less vulnerable and more resilient than centralized monocultures. We distribute leadership wherever we can. Many voices, one song. And I think Lynn even said something about singing all from the same hymn. And that's very true. And this is being incubated in Greenbelt. And I did a talk at Greenbelt, which was an FDR planned community that just so happens to be the home of the Goddard Space Center, where they're doing all the geospatial location tracking of the whole cybernetic system. And then I have this paper that I would encourage people to look at. It's called Towards Self-Determinate Citizen Governance, Trust Boosting Sociocracy 3.0 with Blockchain. So clearly the sociocracy ideal, which is embedded in this Quaker consensus principle, is coming in alignment with blockchain. And to me, even the name consensus, even though it's not exclusively Quaker, and Quakers maybe would say they don't do exactly consensus, but is this idea of coming to a collective decision in a horizontal way, is feeding the tokenized democracy aspect. And so this is a bit of another map, a detail I've mentioned before, the Smiley brothers, who were Quakers. They owned Mohonk House, which is a resort on the Upper Hudson near New Paltz. In the off seasons, they would host these conferences. They were very progressive, but they would talk about things like the Negro problem and like how to assimilate indigenous people and how to, create world peace. And so the American Friends Service Committee and the World Peace construct, I think the Quakers need to come to terms with that, how that fits into the world homeostat and the world brain, because I think it clearly, in the way I see it, the peace, it can be swapped out with steady state and cybernetic engineering. And so the Smiley brothers had very high level people, including people from the Baha'i and Andrew Carnegie and the Peace Endowment, as part of these meetings. And they thought that what they would do is they would solve war by essentially creating an international arbitration structure, like a layer of mediation that would happen that would stop war. That was the story that they lived within. Now, could they imagine that 100 years later, and this is in the 1890s, that it would go from, now we have The Hague, now we have this peace palace. There's some crazy peace palace that Carnegie endowed. Now you've got these international arbitration courts. But really what's going to happen, it's going to be HAL 9000 hooked up with the BlackRock Aladdin, supercomputer running the mediation layer. And that's going to be the smart contract metaverse. And I just don't feel like people have a handle on how the Quakers fit into that, how Carnegie fits into that. Carnegie was a Swedenborgian, so there's a whole lot of like light and transcendent realms going on there, and a fear of natural life. And, I've talked before about the vagina dentata and scary, we're going to control this thing. Like, we're not going to have any out of control nature. We're going to be in charge, men in charge with laws and rules and automation. So this is my last slide, and I'm just getting back to the speech again. I have no doubt, none, that this will be who we will be, and that we will come together as a nation that will secure democracy, that for the next 200 years, we'll have what we had the past 200 years, the greatest nation on the face of the earth. We just need to remember who we are. We are the United States of America, the United States of America. And may God protect our nation, and may God protect all those who stand watch over our democracy. And so underneath it, I have the map that I made of the Japan Moonshot Project, and the fact that the Department of Energy is involved, and the fact that Lawrence Livermore Lab is involved, and the National Science Foundation is involved, and Peter Stone over at UT Austin is involved with his RoboCup robot things. And so when Biden gets out and says, like, we're going to be the greatest nation on earth, one, that's nationalist, and we know that the plan for the metaverse is global, that it's all literally just run as a computing system for this emergent superorganism. And two, clearly, like, things change over 200 years. And this is on the near horizon. The Japan Moonshot Project says, goal 1, by 2050, they want us to live outside of a mind and body in time and space. And so they're lying. They're lying. And to say that, like, may God protect our nation, like, what they're building is actually against any form of God. It is literally a machine. It is creating a machine overlay and pretending as if nothing has changed. And that's not true. Like, it is changing. And so either, like, you're knowingly lying to us, or you're just not clued in enough as president to know what's actually happening. But, and again, I'm not making it about him, because it's the archetype. It's whoever will be in that role in that moment will say those things. It could be Republican. It could be a Green Party person. For God's sake, probably the next one will be a Green Party person, Jason, and they can run the HAL 9000 computer. I mean, that would just be the just desserts, right? The Hegelian dialectic, right? Oh, okay, red, blue, now we'll do green. How about we try green, some eco-fascism? That'd be great. And that's, I feel like, where things are headed. And so again, I don't know if we said all of the things that you might have wanted to say about the speech, but these were the things that jumped out to me as a Philadelphian, as someone who knows about Quakers, about consensus, about the blockchain smart contract layer, about this emergence, about the metaverse, and about the stories we tell and the time portals, that somebody needs to like put a stake in the ground on this and say, this is how I see it on the ground today. And yeah, we'll just have to see how it pans out.
Yeah. There was one other thing that I noticed in the speech, which is when he used the term clear and present danger. And I was trying to think of like, oh, that actually has a meaning. I know there's a movie and a book, Clear and Present Danger. But I looked it up, and it turns out like the clear and present danger there was a court case, Schenck versus the United States, 1919. And it was the earliest freedom of speech doctrine from the Supreme Court, and they were Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes was it was a discussion about like, you know, when speech can be stifled if there's a clear and present danger. Anyways, I would look up the clear and present danger, the history of that terminology, because it has to do.
Did they tell Google?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's actually. Yeah, there's some relevance to that actual. That's actually has legal. There's a legal kind of definition for that exact phrasing. So I just thought that was kind of interesting in terms of like, you know, we're under threat, clear and present danger. You know, what is that setting us up for? Is there some sort of like freedom of speech issue that they're going to be, you know, bringing forward where, oh, you know, these people are a threat to, you know, their speech is a threat to the nation. So,
well, that's going to be the internet sign on. I'm sure that'll be the, you know, you have to be accountable for what you say, and we have to be able to track you back to your, you know, your first login. So I don't know. Does anybody have any questions or observations out there? I don't know if there's still folks hanging out with us or.
Well, there's some conversation. Someone said Buck versus Bell Holmes. I'm not familiar with that one. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, now's the time.
Now's the time.
Yeah, yeah, thank you guys for joining us, once again. And I'm gonna put some other stuff. I'm gonna put another piece out to complement this discussion this weekend as well. But yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions. So
okay.
On that note, maybe we'll just call it good. I think we got a good 4 hours in. So
is it that long?
Well,
Oh,
it's
gosh,
it's
yeah.
it's
3 hours. It's only 3 hours, Jason.
What?
It just felt like 4.
Oh yeah,
I think.
you're right. Yeah, you're right.
It only felt.
Hours.
You're
It's
making
3
me
hours.
feel bad.
No, I love it.
It felt like 4 hours. I don't know.
I always learn a lot. It was great having Lynn here. It's too bad she couldn't stick around, but
Yeah.
until next
I mean, it's some
time.
interesting stuff, don't you think? Like the landscape, the Philadelphia, like the layers. I mean, I think.
Well, and I don't know everyone that's watching, you know, like, you know, we definitely would like to hear from you, because, you know, we're eager for people to like kind of come on board and get this different, because it's a very different narrative than we're used to. It's a very different story, and I'm still, you know, wrapping my mind around this different story, but it's clear there's other things afoot. So.
Yeah, they're not going to tell you about the metaverse sociocracy run by your avatar twin.
Yeah. Well, and I'm grateful for you, because like I said, I you know, I wouldn't I wouldn't be pretty.
I think it's a curse,
stuff.
Jason.
Yeah. But I got it, I got it. Like, okay, yeah, this is, even though like some of the stuff you were presenting seemed out there, I stuck with it, and I'm like, oh no, that's actually a thing, you know. And it's not something that can be ignored. At least I can't ignore it, you know. Like, it's
Here, let me tell you how we're going to cast a spell and create the global embryology of the world planetary democracy logos. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even make it up. But I mean, and these people, again, they're not crackpots. These were very connected people. So I hope they don't get there. I don't really want to be part of a giant glommy thing.
Yeah, me neither. I don't want anybody to, actually. And if people, I just keep saying this, if people really knew what's being put into place, everybody would be against this. It happens incrementally, and it becomes normalized, and they don't actually see that this is the loss of your autonomy. This is the loss of your free will. This is,
But this isn't Klaus. This
yeah,
isn't
it's not.
China. This isn't Klaus. This is us. This is your neighbors building this. And they're your nice, liberal neighbors if you're in Philadelphia, like your nice Quaker neighbor. Like literally, if we don't take responsibility for educating one another, and I don't know what the stumbling block is. I mean, we're still struggling with this. And maybe it's the unlearning that's the hardest part, because I don't think conceptually any of these are really hard concepts. I mean, I'm not really going into detailed levels like physics or something, but people are not getting it. They're not getting it. And I mean, I'm just going to bang on it again. I'm like, if you're talking about crypto, if your focus is limited to crypto and money, and you haven't taken that energetic exchange to the level of smart contract layers and the cyber physical system and learning you're missing it. You're missing it. And I don't know why, but we have to get to that point. We have to get to the point of mixing the tokenization with the cyber physical stuff, or all is lost. Honestly, we'll just be in the web. Like literally we'll be in the web and we won't be able to get out.
So those of you who are watching, we would love to hear, your thoughts, and, what are you having difficulty with, or what are you getting? What are you not getting? Do you think we're kind of out in left field? Because it's interesting, because when people criticize, it's almost never a substantive. Like, when we get criticism, it's never like, oh, I think you're off on this, or that doesn't make sense, or I don't think that's relevant. I don't think the World Sensorium book is actually important or relevant. But it's never, that's not what happens. So, and yeah, definitely would like to hear, some feedback from people about, I can tell even from the conversation, I think people are starting to, come around and seeing this metaverse thing, and it's, not just us. I mean, there's other people that are talking about this, but I think that we've definitely expanded the discussion. I mean, I'm having a hard time keeping up with you.
Veroni patterns.
Veroni patterns.
Hold on for a second.
Oh, someone said that they've asked some questions. And no, oh wait, I see a question from Shannon. Let's see. Let me try to find these questions here, guys. And I apologize if you asked a question and I missed it. I've been kind of watching it, but let's see.
Ooh, do you want to see what I found? Oh, where is it? Look.
Oh, is that the snake?
Veroni.
The Veroni
That's my
snake.
snake. Yeah,
Wow.
can you see it?
Yeah, I can. Here, I can actually put
Yeah.
you. Let me see. Let me do you full screen here. Boom. There we go.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Whoa. So I don't just read books or whatever. Yeah. No, we went on a little hike last weekend, and I didn't squish him. He was on a road. He's very squished, but he has these really pretty powers. It's a hen of the woods. Somebody found this fungi, but I think I'm going to take him up to Bell Labs, and we'll do a little bit of intention setting up at Bell Labs.
So we do have some
Wednesday.
questions. The first one is from Shannon. How exactly do Quakers fit into the metaverse? Science tech aspect of this. I know little about them or their beliefs, but those realms seem so distant. So, have you come across things with the Quakers and the metaverse?
Well, essentially, I mean, for me, the metaverse is the same as like the derivatives products in the game, right? The metaverse is the game board, and what's coming is the betting, the financial betting, and the AI gathering for this new thing. And so, Penn is really a center of this. I mean, that's why I feel this responsibility to tell people, because again, I'm an alumna, like I have ties to Penn, and I'm here in the city, and it has a certain persona, and we don't talk about this. Like, we don't talk about how the Quaker good capitalism is actually the central core piece of social impact finance. I mean, not alone, but Penn's role in this, and I don't think any of the impact space would happen if the liberals didn't uphold it, right? And again, I'm not saying that I don't want people to have what they need, or I don't want us to have an economy that is more humane and respects people's gifts and is more equitable, like none of those things. But we shouldn't be putting any of this on blockchain. And again, the fact that these are all tend to be super well educated people, but they have a very high sense of themselves, that they feel like they know all the things, and they're not devoting the time to knowing what this is. So the social finance part is really important. Penn is really central also in blockchain and alternative energy, which I think that's going to be a piece. In terms of the coding, I don't know so much about the coding, but the photonics and the light, I feel like there is something in this next layer of the realms of the divine spark of light and piezoelectric energy harvest. Because literally this idea of Quakers is that you would like quake, that you would have this piezoelectric energy if you were very spiritual. And then the biggest piece, I think, is actually the consensus mechanism and the blockchain, the horizontality, and this idea of like participatory democracy, participatory decision making. But unless they get out in front and say, no, we're not putting people on blockchain, because we remember actually Bristol was the center of the England transatlantic slave trade. It was a port city. It was the center actually of Quaker, their movement towards abolition. But even within the abolition, then it just gets pushed around. Then it was abolished in England, but not in the United States. Or then we abolished the international trade in the United States, but then we kept women as sex slaves, and had our own slaves born here. Like there were always things, like we didn't just agree that we don't do this to people. And there were niceties put up in front that allowed it to continue on long before it should be over. And so I feel like this is what's coming with the new game. The new game is to perform good behavior in the game and do it equitably and do it horizontally and distributedly. And then that will enmesh with the Quakers very closely.
Someone had asked about how do we stop this, and we've had this discussion. What's the solution? We're not really sure. My thing, when we've said this before, but is educate yourself and others about what it is, and then I do think we need to, refuse. Along the way, people need to just start. The power of no. Just start saying no. We're not participating. I don't think you can fight it. I don't think, it wants us to, we've had this conversation too, but like it feeds off of that. If it wants us to come at it. What was that? There was some quote, like by who was a speaker, and he goes, I want you to come at me with all you got. Like, who was that?
It was Mark Benioff, right?
Yeah.
Or Larry Ellison.
Maybe.
Like the art of war.
I think it was Mark
like
Benioff.
I want your anger. I want that. That feeds it. Yeah. And some of it is like, I appeal to people's better natures. Like, again, I was on a conservative Christian radio show today, and I was just laying it out, not as an ideological, because once you realize it's not ideological, like once you realize we're all part of it, it's a machine, like you can actually bring people together and say, I think you wouldn't want to do this if you knew what it was. And I think we have to take actual responsibility for it. And even if you can just talk about it in a clear way. And that's the thing I've found that's really difficult, even in the quote unquote resistance space, even people who are relatively public figures, is I see things and I say, to people that I'm acquainted with, and there's people in the sphere who are not getting it or getting it wrong, like in my opinion. And maybe, I'm open to people telling me I have it wrong too, but people don't tell me I have it wrong. They just tell me they don't like me. I would like to
every
be wrong.
day. Like, please don't let this be the situation.
Or I'm mean, or I don't know. That lately they've been trying to tell me I'm unstable. I'm like, you had to deal with all this stuff, but like, I'm not unstable. I'm super stable, and I'm very connected with my natural self here. But we need to actually, like, if you're in a space with someone who's getting it wrong, like who's literally thinking that they're going to build a blockchain freedom cell, you actually, in my opinion, you need to invest the time to understand and get a comfort level, because it's like exercising a muscle. You don't just get it right off. To get confident to intervene and not yell at the person, but literally educate them. Like, the blockchain freedom cells are the embryos of the world sensorium planetary democracy global brain. They just are. There's no way that they're not. And so, but you have to spend the time. And if what you're doing is you're chasing around all of this other random content and then trying to like everybody because you don't want to make anybody uncomfortable, that's not going to get us where we need to go. Like, you don't have to be a jerk about it, but like at some point people need to get it. Like, I continue to be ever more exasperated because I've had really sad, frustrating experiences with people where I've said, listen, could you please tell this person that's in your circle that what they just did was off point? Like, could you please redirect them so that they understand why it was off point? And they won't. Like, they simply just won't. Like, and I've already told like these people that it's off point, but I'm like, yeah, tell me that I'm the heavy, I'm the, whatever. But can you also back me up that this is, and it doesn't happen. And I don't know why. Like, I don't know if it's a frequency thing. Maybe it's just everybody wants to belong and everybody's afraid. And Jason, like, maybe you and I are out there and we're tagged with like, oh my gosh, don't interact with them publicly because then you'll be one of them and then you'll be out. You'll be out of the hall on. You'll be in somebody else's hall on. Nobody wants to be in our hall on.
Someone asked about dimorphos. Do you know what that is? Dimorphos?
No, I don't know that right off the bat. Sorry.
Someone asked if you've looked into Walter Russell's work at all.
I
just
Walter Russell's museum.
We just did that. They said I always saw him as one of the good guys. He knew Tesla. He wrote a book called Atomic Suicide as a warning.
Did you know that he worked for IBM for as a management consultant for 15 years in the 20s? And he essentially he lived in Carnegie Hall. Like he was the sculptor of FDR. You don't go in those circles and be the good guy. Like, that's power. Like, that's just the dynamic of power. Literally, I found his whole correspondence for his when he had his download and he got his energy stuff, and he was literally pitching it, like giving the material to the U.S. military and Raytheon. Literally. Like, I have it's as a PDF. I saved it to my blog, but multiple correspondences with them participating back and forth about him giving his technology to Raytheon. So if he's a good guy, like, I would have to ask, like, how does that happen? Like, how are you so naive? Like, you've literally been the sculptor to the White House under FDR and you're giving your shit to Raytheon. Like, that doesn't, like, to me, if you understand that the Cold War wasn't about Armageddon, but was about weaponizing space and getting the radioisotopes ready, you're all of these scientists who opposed bad atomic energy and wanted it to use it for good, atoms for peace and nuclear energy, it all looks very different once you realize the Cold War wasn't what we were told.
And this is from our working group. This is one post that you did on Walter Russell. Yeah. And here's another one.
Oh, and at the end, so we had there's links there to the PDFs. Yeah, NORAD. Like, that's what they said. Oh yeah, they gave this to NORAD. I'm like, okay. But the guy who gave us the tour, because it was like you have to pre-arrange a tour, and I noticed he had a Masonic tie tack as if we were leaving. I was like, oh.
Yeah. I'll post the link to that. You can read that. I just posted the link to the forum, and you just search Walter Russell and you'll see those posts. And then let's see, is there anything else? Do you know John Fetzer? Don't know who that is.
Oh, in Pennsylvania, or
yeah, I don't know who that is.
No, Fetterman. No, I don't know Fetzer.
Okay. All right. Well, it looks like that's all the questions. But thank you guys for joining us.
Okay.
And yeah, we'll be back for more soon.
Next week.
Next week, yeah.
More atomic ecology with Leo.
Next Thursday. Yes. Also, we're going to be doing a video probably tomorrow talking about, Alison and I are putting together a trip to California, and we're going to hit a whole bunch of spots: San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco. So we're actually going to, we have some funding. We have a little bit of money from Alison's pitching in some money, but I'm broke, so I have no money. but yeah, I'm
And
going to
his
do it.
van isn't quite roadworthy yet.
I have my van is never ending. I'll tell you the story tomorrow. But I can even show you pictures of. It's been a nightmare. But I redid the whole front end suspension and it's off. So I need to fix a couple things on that. But anyways, yeah, we're gonna do a little fundraising appeal, and oh yeah, anyway. So yeah, check us out tomorrow, and if you want to pitch in a few bucks for us, we would appreciate that to help us. If you've seen, we've done like, well, we go to Texas. We've been to Texas, Utah. When we go out there, we make quite a few. We're pretty productive. We make quite a few videos, educational videos about actually going to the places.
Poor
where this is
Jason, I put
happening.
him through his paces. Well, a part of it is that like it's a building off of the work I was doing around the eugenics movement and the Spanish mission system. Like that's why California feels really central to me, because looking at it as empire and systems of domination, that the Spanish mission system is really core, and that sort of builds off of Stephen Newcomb's work. So that's why we're focused on and clearly plus already Silicon Valley and is central to the Hollywood military behavioral blockchain industrial complex.
Someone asked, how do they know when we're live? Alison has an email list that she sends out. So is there like a way, if you go to like Alison's website, wrenchingthegears.org, and then just email her. I'll just bring it up here.
I'll put you on.
I'm
assuming there's like no notifications. That's the thing. That's
so
I don't think I have 17,000 subscribers, but
okay,
hardly any.
I need to get rid of the Twitter thing here. Hold on. Let me bring this up. Ignore the Twitter thing. Twitter is no longer.
The Twitter's fine. Yeah.
I need to change this, but this is the email, timstilla@protonmail.com. So if you email Alison and just say, hey, add me to your email list, she'll do that. So yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, thanks
everybody.
Alison. Yep. Till next time.